Welcome to the groundbreaking news program that delves into the heart of Mormonism, your weekly window into the unique intersection of news, history, and culture that resonates with the tapestry of Mormonism. So whether you are tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold.
Good evening, everyone. This is the Mormon Newscast. I'm Radio Free Mormon. I'll be anchoring tonight's show. We're joined, of course, by my able compañera and compañero, Rebecca Biblioteca and Bill Reel. How are you this evening? Starting with Rebecca.
I missed you guys. We have been off a week and it just, something was missing, even though it was Memorial Day and we were all out having fun. I missed you guys.
Well, that's very, very nice. Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. Bill?
I noticed that you didn't say it back, and
Look,
that's okay.
Some things shouldn't have to be said. Okay. So, Bill, what did you miss us guys too?
I missed you guys. I had a little trip and the week off was great. Had a great time, but I'm glad to be back here for the newscast and to pick up where we left off.
Well, we've got some sensational stories for you tonight. Can I see what the list is of those stories, Bill? Top stories.
Sorry about that.
That's
we go.
Okay, that was the thumbnail right there.
Yep.
Okay. But the top stories are: number one, BYU quarterback sacked with sexual assault allegation. I think Bill Reel will be covering that story. He's our man in sports. Utah judge under fire. I'll be taking that story. The Fairview Temple update and more. Who could that be? Is it Rebecca? Yes. LDS tank top garments catching fire. I've got a good bet on that one. Is that you too, Rebecca?
Always garments. Yep.
Okay. Author says Joseph Smith did practice polygamy. Wow, cut my suspenders and call me droopy. An author says Joseph Smith did practice polygamy. He's actually a historian. It's actually John Turner, and his new book on Joseph Smith is just about to come out. And finally, a plea to the Amish to end shunning. All right, so those are the stories for tonight. There's an announcement I think that Rebecca wants to make. It has to do with our brothers and sisters in Christ over at the Reorganites / Covenant, Church of Christ Covenant.
That's exactly right. And I think I have one slide on this because this just dropped this morning. I know we were all expecting it, but the new prophet of the Community of Christ Church has been ordained. It says, God calls whom God calls, church that traces back to Joseph Smith. And this is why it's so interesting to us, because, this is our closest sister church, right? And it used to be known as the RLDS, now Community of Christ. They ordained their first female prophet / president. And it says the church formerly known as the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and delegates at its World Conference in Independence, Missouri, approved the faith's first female prophet / president in its 165-year existence, a female prophet. This is pretty incredible. Stassi D. Crom, who has been serving in the church's governing first presidency, has spent nearly a quarter century in full-time ministry for the faith that, like the much larger Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, traces its origins back to Joseph Smith. So this is incredible. Our sister
It is. Yeah. Rebecca, does that mean she was a counselor, one of the counselors in the first presidency before this?
Yeah, I believe that she was. I know I think she's been an apostle. She's been in upper leadership, and I know that we reported on this. I think it was almost a year ago that she had been chosen. I think I remember the thumbnail, first female prophet.
It was right around the time that the church bought the Kirtland Temple, wasn't it?
That's exactly right. And she was kind of in on that decision, which was a little bit controversial behind the scenes, exactly what was happening. But, she has a vision going forward, I think, for Community of Christ. And now she has formally been ordained. So we will see what happens from here. But it's exciting. I think it's wonderful.
Well, it is an interesting idea that God calls whom God calls, which means God's in charge of this whole shebang. So if God wants to call a woman, God should be able to call a woman, except in the Mormon church, either one of two things is happening. Either one, women can't have the priesthood, and that's just one of the laws that God has to follow, and he doesn't have power to change that law because he's not really omnipotent, or God created the law in the first place and is still bound by that law and can't choose anybody he wants. There's always got to be a guy in the Mormon church.
Yeah, and it's very confusing because why would you underutilize or not utilize at all half of your resources as far as women, right? Why would you not? Can you imagine the brain power, the resources, what women could bring to these leadership positions in upper leadership? It's incredible that in 2025, this is not being utilized.
Yeah, I think the Mormon Church may end up having this thrust upon them for lack of membership to call in all their leadership roles, kind of like on the missions that's been
Yep.
happening with sister missionaries getting leadership roles. Whereas in my day, no, that did not happen.
No. And women being able to make towels. That's really important. We are making progress.
The towels are good.
Towels are good.
Towels are important.
Uh,
And witnessing baptisms.
mhm. Yeah, I was being facetious. There have been changes that I think are leading up to something like that. But literally I think there are more women than men in the church, except for now we're finding that more women are leaving. And to not utilize all of them and everything they can do. I mean, every Relief Society president and primary president has CEO level qualifications as far as what they're doing, in that organization, trying to make ends meet with a limited ward budget, trying to work around upper leadership in the ward. They're incredible. Imagine if they were unleashed, shall we say.
Very good. Oh, the next story is Bill's. Thank you, Rebecca. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about that? Bill, by the way, did you have anything you wanted to say about Rebecca's story?
I had mentioned Stacey Cram being the first female a few weeks ago, and somebody, maybe in the audience or something, somebody said that there might be some other LDS traditions out there with a female leader at the top. I would want to see that, because as far as I know, I've never heard of any faction or sect of Mormonism that has a woman at the top outside of the community of Christ. And kudos to them for going outside of a system that built itself upon patriarchy and has a woman at the top. And I think it's great that they're the first ones to get there, and others will follow, but it may be a few hundred years yet.
Hey, wait a second. Bill, the great point. It's just something that occurred to me about this picture. This lady in the red dress, that's the president of the Quorum of the 12.
Yeah, they have women in all the upper leadership.
They call it a council, but I think it's the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah, to see her ordaining with another gentleman, the prophet. I mean, that's a pretty mind-blowing picture for someone who was raised in the mainstream LDS Church tradition.
Yes. Are we ready for your story now, Bill?
Let's do it. All right. So first off, just to note, there's a YouTube video out there by KSL, Jake Retzlaff, accused of sexual assault. But I'll go here to the story. Brigham Young University quarterback Jake Retzlaff is facing, and I might be pronouncing that wrong, but facing a civil lawsuit filed by a Utah woman identified as Jane Doe, alleging that he raped, strangled, and bit her during an encounter at his home in November of 23. The civil suit, filed last Wednesday in 3rd District Court in Salt Lake County, claims that the two met on social media, and after initial consensual contact, Retzlaff allegedly escalated the situation despite the woman's protest, resulting in physical and sexual assault, at least allegedly. The plaintiff reported the incident to Provo police, but initially withheld Retzlaff's name, citing fear and shock. She later identified him after police inquired about another complaint involving a football player, different player. Jake Retzlaff is accused of battery and sexual assault in the civil lawsuit, per the report. The lawsuit also alleges that police discouraged her from pursuing charges, stating that sexual assault victims never get justice. That's the quote. And
Bill,
this would be the Provo police, by the way.
Yeah. Do I understand this correctly that she had made a similar complaint against a different football player?
No. So they came to her regarding an assault by someone else. And I think they were wanting to ask her, like, hey, was this the person who did it? And so she needed to help the police sort out that was a different incident.
Oh,
they were concerned that there might be one football player that was targeting multiple women. And so they said, hey, we have a complaint against this person. Was that him? And then she said, no, it was actually him. So that means more than one person on the team is involved, potentially, allegedly, in some of this behavior.
Yeah.
With different people, different incidences.
Yeah. And so I'll just note here another story here there's a bunch of these. There's different facets of this story that are being discussed, and we'll go into several of those. But this article came out. This is I believe the Salt Lake Tribune. BYU quarterback Jake Retzlaff accused of sex assault in new civil lawsuit. This is another one, the Salt Lake Tribune. Gordon Monson did his little editorial piece. Allegation against quarterback Jake Retzlaff puts BYU at crossroads. Retzlaff's attorney, Mark Bott, has denied the allegations, asserting that his client is factually innocent and intends to prove this in court. As of now, no criminal charges have been filed against Retzlaff. Again, it's a civil case. BYU has acknowledged awareness of the lawsuit and stated that it takes such allegations seriously, following all processes and guidelines mandated by Title IX. Excuse me. However, due to privacy laws, the university has declined to comment further on the matter. The Provo Police Department has also denied discouraging the victim from proceeding with charges, stating that their investigators and victim advocates are dedicated to providing justice to victims of sexual abuse. Again, RFM, this is the Provo Police. We've had a few little interactions over the years with them.
Well, of course, the reason that they're denying it is because this plaintiff alleged precisely that in her civil suit complaint.
Yep.
She alleged that the Provo Police Department discouraged her from proceeding with charges. That's the context in which they're denying it.
That would be a big no-no, correct?
Yes.
Not that the Provo Police Department has a history of always following the rules. We've had, again, some run-ins there, and I do want to get your thoughts on that at the end. But so
they make a pretty strong statement about it. The police department came out and said, absolutely not. That is not how we operate. That is not what happened. So they're pushing back.
Yeah. And this has, big first off, if a sexual assault occurred, that needs to be dealt with in all the appropriate ways. But you're in this space where an allegation's been made. We live in a country where you're innocent until proven guilty. But there are now other ramifications, both with the sexual assault and just premarital sex when it comes to BYU. So the Salt Lake Tribune has this article: if BYU quarterback Jake Retzlaff doesn't play, who is waiting to replace him? The situation places BYU in a challenging position, as the university must balance its commitment to student safety and adherence to its honor code, which we'll get to in a moment, with the presumption of innocence for the accused. Now, I don't know that the church always, on the honor code stuff, always starts off with you're innocent until proven guilty and only if we have clear-cut evidence. But that's what they're saying here. Retzlaff, who became BYU starting quarterback in 2024, led the team to an 11-2 season and an Alamo Bowl victory. The university's leadership, including President Shane Reese, that name should sound familiar, and athletic director Brian Santiago, have refrained from commenting beyond the initial statement, emphasizing the need to respect the privacy of all parties involved, but especially the churches. As the legal process unfolds, I can't help but be curious how BYU will navigate the complexities of this case, considering both its claimed institutional values and the potential impact on its football program. Again, if he committed a sexual assault, that will settle itself and people have to pay the consequences of doing harm to others for certain. But if this was just, at the very least, if this confirms that sex happened, if he speaks to school officials and says, well, I didn't sexually assault her, but I did have sex with her. When you go to a school like BYU, that raises a lot of secondary issues for an athlete, where sometimes the athletes get preferential treatment and sometimes they pay the price along with what the regular student would have to in certain things. So now we get to the honor code. BYU's honor code prohibits premarital sex, raising questions about potential internal disciplinary actions. One of the more complex layers of this case involves BYU's honor code, which explicitly prohibits premarital sexual relations for all students, regardless of consent. If the allegations are true, the implications are obviously grave, but even if the encounter were consensual, as Retzlaff's attorney suggests, so by the way, his side is already admitting that a sexual experience happened, which means he did in fact break the honor code. It would still constitute an honor code violation. This puts BYU in a difficult position: either uphold the rules and potentially sideline a star athlete on the basis of admitted consensual conduct, or quietly downplay the standards they publicly profess. In high-profile cases like this, the honor code often becomes less a moral compass and more a political tightrope. And I've got the honor code there off to the right, and we all know, if we've been in the church long enough, that there are those rules. But again, there's a certain number of people who listen to our content who have never been Mormon. And so at least should be worth noting that Brigham Young University, the church-owned college, its primary college institution, has an honor code that every student has to agree to, whether members or non-members. While athletes do seem to get to play a little more in some gray area, the church does claim that it upholds these standards to all students. And we should note that there are other things that come into play here that are separate from this case. So and again, I'm just saying this for the benefit of those who have never been Mormon, if you go to Brigham Young University as a believing Mormon and you lose your faith somewhere along the way, and the school and church learn about that, the school kicks you out, takes away all of your credit hours, and you essentially have to start college all over again. Imagine you're born into the Mormon faith, you're now a 20-year-old adult, and your brain tells you that the evidence is insurmountable against the church's truth claims. And so as an act of conscience, you lose your faith and do something that publicly denotes that, you would essentially lose all of your education and have to start over. Now, here we have an athlete who is being charged with something, but at a minimum is acknowledging that a sexual act occurred, and that violates the honor code. So now the question is, what happens to him? So here's another article. This is BYU starting quarterback accused of rape, strangulation in civil lawsuit. So there's that one. I just want to note too, some folks are wondering if Jake is a Mormon. That would be a natural question to ask, since most people at Brigham Young University are. But Jake is not a Mormon. Jake is of the Jewish faith. Jake Retzlaff has made headlines not only for his performance on the field, but also for his unique position as the first Jewish quarterback at BYU. Affiliated with the Reformed denomination of Judaism, Retzlaff has embraced his faith openly, wearing a Star of David necklace, which we'll see in an accompanying picture here, and participating in Jewish rituals such as Hanukkah, menorah lighting, and Shabbat dinners. He got a sponsorship deal with Matzos. That is the first Jewish food being sponsored by an athlete.
And I was trying to get those guys to sponsor Mormonism Live, Bill. Dang it.
Yeah, that's going to be slim to none now. They're probably not going to be sponsoring him much longer either. He probably won't be their advertisement. So BYU, BYU star Jewish quarterback Jake Retzlaff, this was an article from a while back, had scored a sponsorship deal with Monschwitz. Retzlaff is the first athlete to reach a deal with the iconic Jewish food brand. So there's that. I just want to note this picture shows him wearing that Jewish star necklace. And this was in the AISH. That's a Jewish periodical online. So there's that article. I want to note that there was lots of merchandise in this guy's name. I mean, he really is a popular athlete at the school. He's the star quarterback, and BYU has high hopes this year, coming off an 11-2 season. They feel like they've gotten better, and now they may be without their star quarterback, who may or may not have made a really unhealthy, bad, abusive decision. So there's merchandise showing that. And then, Rebecca, you brought this to my attention earlier today, but I'll end on this. This is just to note a similar thing, not in terms of sexual assault, but in terms of acknowledged consensual sex as an athlete at BYU, and what's become a cautionary tale about collision between personal freedom and institutional control. Former BYU basketball star Brandon Davies saw his promising college career and potentially his NBA future sideswiped by an honor code violation. In 2011, Davies was suspended during the Cougars' best season in decades. He played back with was it Jimmer Fredette?
Jimmer. Yeah.
He was the teammate of Jimmer Fredette back when BYU was playing really great basketball. after admitting to having consensual sex with his girlfriend, a violation of BYU's strict no premarital sex policy. At the time, BYU was ranked 3rd in the nation and heading into the NCAA tournament with momentum and national attention. The suspension not only cost the team its chemistry and potential Final Four run, but it also put a public scarlet letter on Davies, raising concerns for scouts and executives about his character. Now, I find that sort of hard to believe, only because if anybody knows the world of NBA basketball, those players travel all around town to town, and I won't say everyone, but a lot of NBA athletes are promiscuous or have lots of relationships all across the country as they play basketball all over the place. And there's been lots of conversation in the news about those kinds of things going on. So,
well, if I can just interject, I kind of looked into that too, because I saw several articles that said, no, he is not guilty of a crime. And this is the thing, other people don't understand. It's simply sex, consensual with a girlfriend, that he's dismissed. When you hear an athlete's been dismissed from a school, it's got to be crime. It's got to be assault. It's got to be something extremely serious. So people did not understand. They finally came to understand this is kind of when the honor code kind of burst on the scene and people went, wow, we admire you for sticking to this. But he had to defend himself over and over. It was just sex with my girlfriend. It was kind of like a red flag. People thought there must have been something more, which I think is what it means by sidelined. You're having to explain this to people that have no understanding that, yes, it literally can just be consensual sex that gets you kicked out of the university.
Right. He's not in trouble for committing a crime, but for being honest about a private relationship. While Davies eventually clawed his way back into the NBA, he had to do it the hard way, going undrafted, bouncing through summer leagues, 10-day contracts in G League rosters. Many analysts believed his trajectory was unfairly hampered. Had he played at nearly any other Division I school, his personal life would have stayed personal, and his draft stock likely would have reflected his performance, not his compliance with religious code. For athletes weighing offers from faith-based universities, Davies' story is a stark reminder that off-court policies can sometimes play a bigger role in your future than what you do on the court. So again, I'll just note, for the athletes out there who are attending Mormon schools and quietly having consensual sex with their girlfriends, you run a really high risk of, if you get caught, the church could literally end your hopes of a professional career on consensual sex with your girlfriend. So it is something that I think every athlete who signs up at the church's universities would need to consider. And I think that's the last slide. Let me just double check. Yes, that's the last slide. I can't really comment much on the story because we don't know what happened, and it has to see its way through the court system. But I think often in these spaces, athletes have a sense of privilege, and these things, abuse and harm, happen from time to time. And I hope that whatever happened between the two of them, that it gets sorted out in a way that brings justice to whatever issues occurred, and that if innocent, found innocent, if guilty, found guilty, that all works itself out in a way that's helpful to those who have been hurt in the process. So anything from you guys?
Yeah, I can comment definitely, generally on athletes at BYU. And I will say, as I remembered this Brandon Davies story and said, we should talk about this, I looked into it further, and I did not realize this happened during March Madness. The following August, he was reinstated and finished his career at BYU. This would not happen with someone else that was kicked out of school for having sex. You would not get back in. In fact, as you mentioned, Bill, and I'm speaking from someone who was a student at BYU all the way through my master's, and then someone who worked on campus for a decade. So I'm very familiar. There are many things that will get you kicked out. Like you said, changing your faith, not paying tithing. They can take away your credits and not let you graduate, right? Same-sex romantic behavior, holding hands on campus. There are so many different things like that. And simply being in an apartment alone with someone of the opposite sex. It's not even that he had to have had sex and admit, like his lawyer is saying, yes, this happened, although, then there's questions of the details, consensual or not. Simply admitting that you were alone in an apartment can get you kicked out of BYU. this actually happened to me. I guess I can tell this story that I had a boyfriend. I was in my master's. He was in the very last semester of his senior year, and he was really, really sick, deathly sick, throwing up, passing out. I went to his apartment and I took him some soup and I took care of him and I slept overnight on the couch. At BYU, the culture is to get yourself off the hook, you tell on someone else. So one of his roommates had been turned in for drinking. He did like his peppermint schnapps. That roommate, to get the heat off of him, said, "Oh, yeah, well, guess what? My roommate's girlfriend slept over." We were taken to standards. We had our, my master's program, his last semester, everything was threatened. I mean, there was a 2-week period there where we thought we were going to be kicked out. And this was simply for me sleeping on the couch when he was deathly ill. And I'm swearing on a stack of waterproof Book of Mormons. That is exactly all it was. So, the fact that athletes perhaps get a different pass, a different kind of treatment. When I was there as a student, I'd go to parties sometimes when I was invited, and there would be phone calls. Hey, Standards might be checking in, or the RA might be coming, get the athletes out. So that's why I watched this story with such interest, because I just wonder by which standard they are going to decide how to, take care of this issue. I don't know. There's a lot of nuance to it, and a lot of articles are delving in and saying, what will BYU do? So it is very interesting. BYU is a microcosm other people don't understand. And to look at an athlete and say you were kicked out, it really can hurt your career, because people are always going to say it couldn't have just been for that. It couldn't have just been for that. So I don't know. It's an unfolding story.
Wow. Well, I hope you beat the shit out of Mr. Schnapps.
Yeah, no, I wanted to, but that's how it was at BYU. You would try to, under pressure say, oh yeah, well, my roommate's doing this. I mean, I don't even blame him for that. And
what a bunch of stoolies.
I know. No, at the end, it was pretty crazy. We were in the standards office and they said, I have an envelope in each of my hands. One says you're gone. One says you get to stay. And then he kind of went like this.
No, what?
No, I'm not making, I have many, many stories I have never shared. I kind of eke them out one at a time. And he handed us one of the envelopes and it said, okay, you guys are okay. You can stay and finish. But I'm still traumatized over it.
Either both envelopes said you could stay. Either both envelopes said you could stay and he was playing games with you.
Oh, yeah.
Or he left it up to chance, which also speaks volumes about the lack of credibility in making a decision.
Yeah.
So no country for old men.
No, I know. No, and they did not believe that is what had happened. But stack a waterproof Book of Mormons, that is what happened. I slept over in the apartment because he was really, really, really sick. And I was even on the phone with his mom going, what do you think I should do? I mean, I don't know. It's a traumatic event from my BYU days. That's for sure.
Isn't it? I'll just go off on a little tangent here. Isn't it a strange thing? You have to be clean shaven, for instance. I think maybe, do they let beards now or no?
No, I think they let mustaches now.
Okay.
I see that all the time, but I still think no beards on campus.
Beards weren't allowed forever, right? So Jesus has a beard. You can't have consensual sex as a student in college, but your founder can have as much non-consensual or premarital sex as he wants to have.
Jesus had consensual sex in college.
Yeah. So, well, I
wasn't very controversial.
It was UJ, University of Jerusalem.
Yeah, there you go.
Any original BYU.
Any thoughts from you on the story, RFM, especially with the Provo police? If in fact they tried to sway her from pressing charges.
Well, that would be wrong. But look, here's the thing. I don't know. I haven't investigated this, but from what you've told me, okay, if this is correct, all right, that your interpretation, remember where I got the wrong idea about that particular line in that story, Bill? And you guys said, no, they were investigating another allegation against a different football player. Okay, that doesn't sound like they're discouraging people from making complaints against football players.
Yeah.
So if all that's correct, then it doesn't sound like, unless they got, they really like the quarterback and he's the best. So no, don't do this. And I also understood from that article you read, and I only say that because sometimes, I don't get all the facts that I would like in the articles that are written, is that it sounded like it said that she never even got to the point of identifying who it was that she was claiming had assaulted her. Is that true?
Say that again.
The first time, no. The second time, when asked if it was this other player, she said no, it was, and name names. The first time she would not say who it was.
What's the first time?
She went in
When it
and she
happened
did
in
report.
23.
She showed bruises allegedly and different things. And they said, who is it? And she said, I don't want to say. I don't want to say. They asked her several times, according to the police.
When's
And they
the
said, well,
second
then we
time?
can't do anything because you're not naming a name.
Right.
Then
So when's the
later,
second time?
that's when the police went to her and said, hey, we've got this other assault from a BYU player. Could this be the name? You know,
When was
nod
it?
yes or no.
How much later is what I'm wondering.
The original thing happened in 23, and
Right.
this just started to clear itself up. The second time around was like a month or two ago, when the process of starting to file charges.
Well, it's not charges, and that word has been used too.
Yeah, I'm using
There
it
are
the
no
wrong
charges
way.
filed.
Right.
Yeah, there's a
Civil
civil complaint that's been filed.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
And she did
It's
do
okay.
a rape kit. Somebody was asking that in
It
the
wasn't
chat.
just
And
you,
that's
it was
why
in the
she
article
had,
too.
a few days later. And so she was able to talk to the police about that. But because she would not give a name, they just kind of reported the incident. They have it all written down,
Okay.
but no
So
name.
all I'm saying is this: if she doesn't give the name to the police for whatever reason, and if she's, agreeing to that, I don't know how many of these are disputed facts, or how many of these are contested facts, or how many of these are just wrong facts reported wrong in the newspaper. But if that's correct, and she went in and she did the rape kit, but she would not give the name of the person who did it, then how are we supposed to fault the police for that?
It seems like whatever happened, I'm not going to give you the name, but I'd like to know how this would work itself. Maybe she's looking for some reassurance that it can be handled or at least there's a good hope of it being handled correctly, because it doesn't make any sense that it's in the civil suit that the police told this to her. This only makes sense to me that the Provo police said this in the original incident back in 2023. So she may have gone, again, I don't know.
Yeah.
She may have gone to the police,
Mhm.
said, I'm not going to give the name unless you guys can make me some assurances that you're going to pursue this. And then they say the thing that she says they said.
No. She goes in there to make the report, and they say the same. Well, it's two versions of the same story, if you're correct. But she's saying, no, they told me not to say the name, and they're saying, no, she wouldn't give us the name.
Yeah,
Well, and I'm not saying that. She might have withheld the name and only was willing to give it had they said something different than the answer they gave her, which was that you're probably not worth doing this because it's not going to work out well for you.
Right, but they claim they never said that. They would never say that, but they just couldn't do anything because there wasn't a name. And keep in mind, this is right after he started. This is November of 2024-3. I mean, he had, I think she may have known what this would do. You know what I mean? This is huge. This is a big thing. The other thing I wanted to bring up is I thought, I wonder if the church is Curtin McConkie representing him, as his lawyer. I looked into that. It's a big lawyer, Hollywood lawyer.
Sure.
He's done huge athlete assault cases. So his family or whoever has called in the big guns for this, people that have dealt with this before.
Sure.
And remember too, I mean, there's another story here. Remember AJ Dybansta. So now that you have the name, image, likeness, where you can get paid millions of dollars by the school, how does it work? Let's just take a hypothetical. AJ Dybansta got, I think, $8 million, $7 million, something like that. Now, let's say in his freshman year, he's sexually active with his girlfriend, and it gets public. If the church punishes him, not only do they lose their very best basketball player and all hopes of a good season, do they get paid back the $8 million, or do they have to just let him walk? And if my hunch would be that he gets to keep the cash, and if he does get to keep the cash because they're the ones who, got rid of him for whatever. Now, what kind of impetus is there on BYU to go, well, let's just not handle this the right way? Because not only will we have a losing season instead of a winning one, but we'll also be out $7 or $8 million.
Well, my expectation is that such an eventuality, which seems pretty reasonable and able to be predicted, was in the contract.
Yeah, and this
And
will
if not, it certainly will be in the next one.
Yeah, this will happen. There's no doubt that this quarterback is getting paid millions of dollars with name, image, likeness as well.
You got to give it all back. If you screw up on the rules, and it's on you, pal. And it's all going to be in several paragraphs. It's going to be nailed down, I'm sure. 6 ways to Sunday. By the way, the reason I'm fighting against this idea about the Provo police even though I've had my own run-ins with him. Okay. The reason that I'm fighting against it so hard is because it would be such an astonishingly bad thing for police to do what she's alleging they did. And every now and again, and I'm thinking of something in particular, and I don't need to share it with you, I have heard of outrageous allegations against law enforcement that my first impulse is I can't believe that that would happen. And then I end up finding out it actually did. So I know that it can. It's just that it's an astonishing allegation. And if they did that, then there needs to be some real people losing their job.
The athletes, I've heard on numerous occasions, the athletes get preferential treatment. The
I'm sure.
police turn a blind eye to the drinking and the ruckus, that noise that happens in those dorms. And again, you've already had run-ins with how they handle information, how they utilize the police department to accomplish the work of the church, blending the public sector with religious-based institution. And I'm with you, RFM. I'll give the benefit of the doubt, but it wouldn't surprise me one bit if they tried to protect their star athletes.
It would surprise me if this is not protecting in sense of, oh, you're drinking. Okay, well, just keep it down and knock it off. Okay. This is overlooking an allegation of a felony, of a rape. Okay. That would surprise me.
But supposedly they said this to her without knowing it was such a high profile athlete. And what they did say allegedly was, you know what, you don't get much justice for sexual assault. So really there's no point to pursue it. That's what she claims they said.
She's claiming that they said that without even knowing it was the quarterback.
Without even knowing the profile of the player. Exactly. And they made a very strong statement that I did a short about where they said, absolutely not. We have a victim, response team. We always follow through as we can. In this case, there was no name. So, but there is another player in this, no pun intended, that someone in the chat brought up, and that is the booster and the booster's checkbook. I feel that that's a big part of it too. They are the ones paying the money. NIL is, it's not from the church. It's not from the university. And how much pull and sway do they have on their 7 million that their organization forked over to get, for example, the notable basketball player, and so there's just so much to this. It's going to be really interesting to follow.
It should be noted, the police did know it was a football player because they came back to her on the other incident. So I can imagine she said it's a very important player on the team, just didn't name the person, but the police did know it was an athlete and may have known it was a star athlete.
Okay. Well, that's as clear as mud. But I think that we'll just have to, my gosh, it's not like, look, if I'm the attorney, okay, and by the way, this is what I was going to say. It slipped my mind for a second. This is the armchair quarterbacking, right? But this was a rookie error. This was a dumb thing to put in the complaint. It has nothing to do with the allegation that you're making, which is against the quarterback. It's not against the police department. So why would you put in an outrageous allegation, whether true or not? Okay. It's an outrageous allegation. It's an allegation of outrageous police misconduct. Why would you put that in there when it has nothing to do with your case and it's so easily susceptible? It's going to be refuted. The police are going to say, no way in heck this happened. And now you're starting already with a strike against your credibility.
Well, I had this thought about why say that, because you have to explain why you waited such a long period of time to bring it all forward.
Well, if you're going to come up with a reason, you should say something that's not so easily refutable. Just saying. Truth is a relative concept. I'm going to paraphrase Boyd K. Packer. Okay. Some truths are more useful than others.
I think, especially in Utah, it's a one-party state. Only one party has to give permission to recording something. Anytime you talk to anyone in any authority position, you should at least consider recording that conversation so that if somebody says something didn't happen, you'd have the actual evidence that it did.
That's why we record these episodes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go.
Yes. That's why I also record all my private conversations with John DeLynn.
Smart.
That's Mormonism After Dark material. I apologize. And yes, I'm just kidding. Okay.
I'm scared to talk to you on the phone now if you're recording things.
Well, you should be. No, fortunately for you and for John and for everybody else, number one, I have ethics and integrity. And number two, it's a crime in my state. Okay.
And for the record, I always start with the assumption that RFM is recording me. So therefore, I only answer questions accordingly.
Very good. Yes.
I have the opposite assumption. And I always say, I'm going to tell you this that I've never told anyone before, RFM. And I've done that so many times. Now I'm very nervous.
I'm just proud that I was able to draw out that story that you told me so long ago.
It's true. I said I'd never share it, but I thought it was so relevant here, you know.
Mm-hmm. I try and arrange the story so that they'll try and draw those out of you.
Somebody's asking if, well, they're not asking, they're saying, but I'm going to ask, would the police department have recorded that conversation with her?
A lot of times, if they put him in an interview room, a soft interview room, they almost all have video recording and audio recording components that are going on in there nowadays, but they got to turn them on. And, you know, sometimes if you got a person like this who's coming in to report something, you know, maybe not. Usually you have them on when you're talking to suspects. From the police's point of view, that's the important stuff. That's the stuff that we're going to want to keep. Having her come in and talk, well, maybe not so much. I don't know is the answer. So a judge opted, this is my story. A judge opted not to send a child sex offender to prison. GOP lawmakers are demanding he resign. This is from the Salt Lake Tribune. Robert Gerke and Jessica Schreifels, May 28th, 2025. And there are those two intrepid reporters. Here's Mike Schultz. A chorus of Republican lawmakers, led by House Speaker Mike Schultz, are demanding a Utah judge resign, or they could explore impeachment after the judge did not send a man to prison who pleaded guilty to having child sex abuse material. Now, I got this story because I'm the lawyer. It has to do with law stuff, right? And I just thought it was going to be this very simple story. And because I got another one, which is going to be my main story, and I was doing this one in addition. But I started digging into this. I remember when Rebecca sent me this story last week. That's how I found out about it. And I looked at a picture of the judge. He looks very young. And I said, well, that's what happens when you get young people on the bench, but who need more experience. But that's not the case. As I dug into this further and actually looked at some materials and listened to the audio of the entire sentencing hearing, all right, that's not what's happening here. The judge did not do anything wrong. The prosecutor is the one who did something wrong. But the people who are really doing something wrong is this guy right here, Mike Schultz, and this lady right next to him, who's joining him in trying to get this guy to resign for not doing anything wrong. It's pure grandstanding. It's kabuki theater, and they should be ashamed of themselves. But the Utah court said in response that 7th District Judge Don Torgerson followed the sentencing guidelines that the legislature itself approved earlier this year. Let me say this again. But the Utah courts said the Utah courts never weigh in on a controversy. But they did here. That's how significant this is that they said anything. And what they said was, and the reason they're saying it is because KSL, who originally reported on this story, left out incredibly important details that totally managed to skew it and make it look like the judge did something wrong when he didn't do anything wrong. Okay, so I'm going to say this again, but the Utah court said in response that 7th District Judge Don Torgerson followed the sentencing guidelines that the legislature itself approved earlier this year. Mike Schultz, this guy right there, he approved the legislation and the guidelines, the sentencing guidelines that were used by this judge in sentencing that guy, and now he's complaining about it. All right. Last week, Torgerson, that's the judge, sentenced the 22-year-old Maine man. He was 20 years old at the time this was going on. The guy was, it's been 2 years. to 112 days in jail, which he had already served, plus 4 years probation for possessing child sex abuse material. During the sentencing hearing, Torgerson twice mentioned the defendant's privilege, including when the judge told him that 112 days in jail was a lot of jail time for someone your age who comes from some level of privilege. Okay, judges say stuff all the time, and I would hate to be in a position where I'm saying stuff all the time and being recorded or saying it live, and then have somebody take something I said that was inartful and then use it against me. But I think that's what's going on here. Because what's really going on here, let me just tell you this, okay, everybody? I had to figure this thing out because it's not obvious from the reporting. But what's going on there in Utah is the same thing that goes on here in Washington. And let me just describe what we have in Washington, okay? If you get convicted of a sex offense, especially a child sex offense, okay, you can either go to prison for a really long time, or under certain circumstances, you can take advantage of a law that is called a SOSA, S-S-O-S-A, Special Sex Offender Sentencing Alternative. And what that means is if you go and you get an evaluation, and these things are extensive and expensive, plus corroborated by polygraphs to make sure you're being honest, and you find somebody who says, yeah, you got a problem, obviously, we can treat this, then there is a special exception, okay? And what it means is you don't have to go to prison for 15 years or 20 years. Instead, you go to jail, local jail. Let me back up. Jail means up to a year. Anything up to 12 months, you serve local. That's in the jail. Anything over 12 months in a day and up, that goes into the prison system, the state system. And I think that's the same thing there in Utah. All right. So you got jail versus prison. That's going to be important here in a second as well. But what it means is you get sentenced. Now, if the judge says, okay, I'm going to grant the SOSA, I'm going to grant this alternative, then the judge has the power to sentence you in Washington any place between 0 and a year. And usually it's much closer to a year. Has been my experience. So what that means, though, is this, is that you are convicted of this crime or crimes, as is the case here. There's 2 counts that this person pleaded guilty to. You have to register as a sex offender. And what you have to do is you have to complete your treatment as prescribed. You have to not get in any other trouble. You can't violate any of the terms of your probation, because if you do, you could be brought back into court, have this special exception yanked, and now you're going to go to prison for 30 years. That's the stick over the head of a person in a situation like that, to help them realize it's very important that they follow through on their commitments. Okay. This is what they're talking about here. They have a similar thing in Utah. And what had happened was this, okay, is that the defense attorney, they come in, they do all this stuff. They get the guy out of jail. He either bails out or is released 6 months ago. And he gets an evaluation. He's in treatment. He's doing all the stuff. He's 20 years old. I don't think he has any priors or anything like that. So he is actually a really, really good candidate. He's the kind of person that this law is made for. And once again, this law was passed unanimously, by the way, earlier this year, at least this current version of the law, which means Mike Schultz and everybody else who's raising a ruckus in the legislature and trying to appear so righteous now, like they didn't have anything to do with passing the damn thing. And now they're going to complain about it being used in a situation where it makes sense. All right. So last week, Torgerson sentenced the 22-year-old man to 112 days in jail. I'm going to say this other thing too, okay? 112 days is in Utah law, okay? Utah law, the main range for this kind of thing, if the judge is going to follow the sentencing alternative, is 200 days. Is that right? 220 days. I don't know why, but it comes up in the hearing. 220 days, and I think I've got this right. So he had already served 112 days, so he gives him credit for time served. It's a little bit more than half, because the midpoint of that range is where the default position should be under the law. The midpoint between 0 and 220, which is 110 days. So this guy had actually done 2 days more, and actually probably 3 months, or 3 months, no, a month or so more, with credit for good time, but we don't have to get into that. Anyway, he gets credit for good time, and he doesn't have to go back into custody at this point as long as he does everything he's supposed to do. Now, here's the other thing. If up here and down in Utah too, the person gets sentenced to, a person is found guilty. This guy had already pleaded guilty sometime before. The person pleads guilty to a crime like this. Then the Department of Corrections up here, down there, they call it the AP&P, the Adult Probation and Parole Department. They do what's called a pre-sentence investigation, where they investigate the case. They have to read stuff. They have to interview, whatever people. They got to do something, to investigate. And then they look at the law, and then they make their own recommendation to the judge as to what the probation department thinks should happen. The probation department, which is part of law enforcement, it's not, like an arm of the public defender's office. This is law enforcement. They recommended the same damn thing. I don't know if KSL mentioned that, but that'll become more obvious now. Okay, so during the sentencing hearing, Torgerson twice mentioned the defendant's privilege. Yeah. Okay. Oh, here's Mike Schultz. He's the one on top. Schultz blasted the decision following a KSL report on the sentencing. Okay, so he's blasting it because of the KSL report, calling it deeply troubling and indicative of a broader pattern within the judiciary, and said Torgerson should no longer be on the bench. Judge Torgerson's comments and decision are a failure of justice and cannot be ignored, Schultz said via social media. He must resign. Who the hell do you think you are? He can take care of a deer at least. He should not be able to continue sitting on the bench and serving the people of this great state. Jeez, what a loser. Schultz said decisions like Torgerson's fail to deliver justice for victims, in this case, children, and erode confidence in the legal system. Other lawmakers agreed. So there's a picture of Speaker Mike Schultz. And this was the lady who was sitting next to him in that earlier picture. House Majority Whip Carrie Ann Lisenby, a Republican from Clearfield, called the Torgerson's ruling extremely concerning and suggested it might warrant impeachment rather than wait for a Judicial Conduct Commission investigation, which could take up to a year. What are you even talking about? What are you talking about? A Judicial Conduct Commission investigation for a guy doing something that what he's doing his job. The judge has discretion to do a lot of different things, and this isn't even a remarkable use of his discretion. He basically went right down the middle. He cut the baby in half. The legislature is within their authority to file impeachment papers on anyone who holds high office and is alleged to be guilty of malfeasance in office, high crimes, or misdemeanors. These things are not defined and are fairly broad categories, she said on social media. Do I think this judge's conduct is serious enough to justify impeachment? I'm not sure. Well, then why are you talking about impeachment? Jeez. But I believe it is serious enough to look into. You see, I was reading this, and then I find out what happens, and I'm going, what are you guys smoking there in the Utah legislature? They're crazy. It's like they don't even know what the hell they're talking about. And it's one thing to not know what you're talking about, but it's another thing to start condemning a judge for doing his job and talking about impeachment when these are the guys who are totally wrong on the issue, and they're the ones who passed this thing in the first place. Any comments before I go on, Bill or Rebecca?
No, I'm just glad that you thoroughly went through it, because there are so many articles and all of them extremely negative toward this judge. So you kind of read through it, but without the trained eye that you have, you're like, yeah, he must have done something. So your spin is really different from everything else that we're reading in the media.
I think mine's I'm trying to be as factual as I possibly can. By the way, Bill, in case you don't know, there's a slide in the couple from here where I actually have the audio, and there's 2 timestamps, but there's a link which will need to be clicked, and then
So
just remember that. Thanks for reminding me, Rebecca. I believe it's serious enough to look into. The Administrative Office of the Courts. Now, that's the state office of the courts. This is the people who don't talk about this kind of stuff very often. That's why it's remarkable. said in a statement Wednesday that Torgerson's sentence squarely aligned with the guidelines from the Utah Sentencing Commission, which were approved by the legislature earlier this year. It also accused KSL of omitting several relevant and important facts in its original reporting. The limited quotes provided by KSL are without context and should not be the sole basis for any conclusion. The statement ends. There's a picture of KSL. The judiciary is committed. This is a continuation, I believe, of the same statement. The judiciary is committed to transparency and encourage anyone who has questions about the sentence to listen to the entire audio recording of the sentencing hearing. And they provided a link, and so I did. KSL did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Wonder what they're going to say about this. Now, this is not the one that plays, Bill. It's down below. But this is what the video cast looks like. Down here is, this is Stephen J. Stocks. He's the prosecutor. I think he's the elected prosecutor. I'll have a little bit to say about him. And up here in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the judge right up there. He's in the frame up left. And then down below him and across is the courtroom itself and the defendant, whose name was Aiden Hoffman. For whatever reason, they didn't want to say it in that other newspaper story. It's Aiden Hoffman. It's mentioned here. And Aiden Hoffman is there in the white shirt and the tie. His attorneys are with him. His parents were also sitting in court. They're referenced. I can't really make them out, but they're mentioned. And so the attorneys talk from the courtroom, judge talks from the courtroom, and the prosecutor is zooming in. So this is what it looks like when you click that link that I told you about. And then you get to this language above. Here we go. Is that a different one, Bill?
This is the video. If
I wasn't quite ready for that.
Okay, here's that.
Thanks. Okay, so, and then there's language above, which I blew it up so we could read it. And then the video cast below. Here's what it says, okay? This is on the Utah Court System website. In a recent article regarding a sentence imposed by Judge Don Torgerson in a criminal case, KSL omitted several relevant and important facts. For instance, the state expressly agreed in its written plea agreement that the defendant would receive probation rather than a prison sentence. I've got to say that again. For instance, the state expressly agreed in its written plea agreement that the defendant would receive probation rather than a prison sentence. Now, this is going to be remarkable to you because when we're going to play a little clip of this prosecutor, he is going to, after having agreed to all this stuff, he is going to welch on the deal. He's going to try and welch out of it. This is forbidden. You don't get to agree to make a recommendation to the judge as a prosecutor or a defense attorney. It just comes up more when it's a prosecutor for whatever reason. And then signal to the judge that you're really not behind it. That kind of stuff will get it reversed very quickly. Because if you have an agreement, you have to advocate for your agreement. You can't say, okay, I'm going to agree to the sentence. Okay, well, we'll do an agreed recommendation, right? And then say, yeah, I don't really think that. I think he's really worse than that. Does that make sense, Bill? Do you understand what I'm talking about there? And Rebecca?
Yeah, he's going along with it on the front end and then going against it when it's all said and done.
Well, especially, I mean, you get a guy to plead guilty to 2 counts in exchange for an agreed recommendation, and then you're going to welch on your agreement. Okay, this is really, really bad stuff. And this prosecutor, no, this guy should not be a prosecutor anywhere. Okay, that's rude. That's a rude thing to say. I've made mistakes. I continue to make mistakes. I try to learn from my mistakes. You need to learn from this mistake because this was unethical. And I'm talking to that prosecutor right now, and you'll see what I'm talking about. He actually says the words. So additionally, the sentence imposed by Judge Torgerson was squarely aligned with the 2025 Adult Sentencing Release and Supervision Guidelines promulgated by the Utah Sentencing Commission and unanimously approved by the Utah legislature during the 2025 general session. Wow. This is important information. This is why The Utah courts are weighing in on this because KSL got it so bad and so wrong as to make it look like this judge did something wrong. Adult probation and paroles, that's AP&P, the ones who did the pre-sentence, right? Probation recommendation was also aligned with the adult sentencing, release, and supervision guidelines. In other words, the recommendation they made, which the judge followed, also followed the guidelines that were promulgated by the state and approved by the legislature. The limited quotes provided by KSL are without context and should not be the sole basis for any conclusion. The judiciary is committed to transparency and encourages anyone who has questions about the sentence to listen to the entire audio recording of the sentencing hearing. And I'm going to suggest that too. We're just going to play 2 clips, okay? And the first clip is from it's from the prosecutor. It's 615 to 735, so it's just a little bit over a minute. And he's actually going to say that there's a stipulation between the parties. Now, a stipulation is a big lawyer word. It means an agreement. There's a stipulation between the parties. I want to express why this is so important. That there was a stipulation that this was not a violent offense. This offense did not involve violence. If it's not clear, by the way, this guy is possessing images and video, right, of horrible things involving children. Okay. But there was a stipulation between the parties, an agreement between the parties that it didn't involve violence. Why is that important? Because if the judge finds that there's violence, then that could be used as an aggravating factor in order to put the person in prison instead of giving him this special program, right? Okay. So what the prosecutor is going to say is, we agreed with the defense. There's a stipulation between the parties that this is a nonviolent offense, but he's going to tell a judge, but you can look at the facts and you could make your own determination on that, judge. That's where he is unethical as F. It happens in the middle of this clip. And Bill's being great because he's actually trying to find the exact place. Yeah, 614, that'll work. And then just take it to 735.
Yep. And then I just want to, I'm worried that there will be double sound. So if you'll just wave your hand and I will then mute one of the sounds so that you don't get the double sound. But let's see if this plays.
To show the court these things is because these things do have an impact. And when we only put it in words and brush it off as child sexual abuse or child pornography, that's not sufficient. I feel exceptionally strongly about this. It was important that we argue out Joe because I think that the amount of time is not sufficient. Additionally, I'd note for the court, the parties did stipulate that violence was not used in this circumstance, but the court's not bound to that. I note that for the court. The court can make the decision. I think the light amount of jail doesn't really take into consideration the severity of this case. I think there are aggravating factors, such as the distribution. Now, I know he's engaged in treatment, but imagine all of those images of all of those children that he's seeking out. I understand he needs treatment. It's obvious, but I do not think that that's sufficient. Now, he was granted an exceptionally generous ability from the court to be out only after serving 121 days of jail. But this type of behavior and this type of charge demands, in the interest of justice for the children, that he be incarcerated in the Utah State Prison. So that is the request that we have from the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
There you go. Thanks very much for that. So that's why we told the difference between jail and prison, because that's what he's saying. He says, he should go to prison. Okay. He should go to prison. And that means don't give him the benefit of this program. That's the translation. If what the Utah court said, though, is true, that the prosecutor had already agreed about probation, and now he's really going back on the deal, even worse than what he said, that would be really problematic, even worse than it is. Okay, so the next one I wanted to mention was from the judge. It's not actually where he's sentencing the person. He did sentence him. You can watch it if you want. He goes on for a bit and he talks about things and he uses that word privileged a couple times. There's nothing really remarkable about the sentencing hearing. I've seen hundreds of them just like it. There's nothing amazing that happened here. except for what the prosecutor said. It's like, did you really just say that? Did that really just happen? And I'm sure it would have been made a much bigger issue if the judge had not followed the agreed recommendation. Okay. Then it would be subject to appeal. But here's something that the judge says, where he says, this is a young kid. It was 20 when it happened. And, you're still young. You can still change. And then he compared it to other people who are 75 years old that he says have appeared in front of him. This is from 1850 to 1930. So this is 50 seconds. This one caught my attention. Maybe it will yours too.
And more serious things. I suspect this didn't start with child pornography for you. I suspect this started with age appropriate adult, pornography. In my experience, working with offenders, that's where it starts. And it escalates to these more extreme kinds for some people, for whatever reason it did for you. And so, you're not the 75-year-old Mormon bishop that is doing this and perpetrating on kids and grandkids. You're not that person yet. I hope you never will be. Okay.
Boom.
But you're
Wow.
someone who had
This happens so often. This is a trope. This is a trope for the judge in Utah in the 7th district. You're only 20, you're not a 75-year-old, you're not the Mormon bishop who's been offending against his, he didn't say against kids and grandkids. What did you think of that, Rebecca?
Specific. That's very specific. It's almost like he said that I see almost every week, right?
Yes.
He kind of left that part unsaid. But yeah, he says, I see this all the time. You're something different. I'm going to handle it differently. Wow.
Yeah. I think that part may get more comment now that I'm bringing it to light.
Yep.
Can I ask a question here? So when I didn't read the story in depth, I saw the thing when we talked behind the scenes about this being one of the stories to cover this week. I was familiar with sort of the headline of it. When he uses the word privilege, when I saw just the headline and read like the first paragraph, what I took from it was this kid comes from a wealthy family. He's a family of privilege, and because the family has privilege, he shouldn't have to pay the price of justice that other people pay. Is that the way it's being used here?
I don't think so.
What do you?
It could be interpreted that way. He's disputing that. He meant it that way. It was a dumb thing for him to say, regardless, and I'm sure he regrets it. He was going to go there anyway. I mean, it doesn't make any difference if this kid is rich or if he's not. The money does help, of course, to get out of jail. The money does help to get the evaluation and stuff. There is some public money that can be accessed, but it's not easy. So there certainly is an aspect to that that's true. I don't think the judge would have done any different given the facts in front of him, regardless of where this kid was born or whether his parents were present in court. Although the very fact that you have family with you in court when you're asking the judge to release somebody or reduce bail is important, not just to show the judge that this person has friends, but to show the judge that this person has support in the community, because a person with support in the community will tend to do better than a person who doesn't have support in the community.
So just maybe I'm the only person here that it's not clear. When he says it that way, what do you think he means by that? What is, again, not that you can be exactly in his head and know what he's saying, but having worked in this system, what is the judge trying to convey?
I think all he's trying to say is you've never been in jail before, and this was probably a shock for you and probably enough for you to remember that you don't want to come back.
Which is 100% true and valid. And yeah. Anyway, okay, thank you.
So I'm not saying that that's the correct, but that's what I took from it. I didn't sense anything when he said it in court. I don't think the prosecutor really reacted visually or anything. It was just sort of, and then he sentenced him and the hearing was over.
It is strange since it is the same politicians as a group that gave this sort of ability to do it this way. And
I think what happened is very simple, is that this happened, and for whatever reason, somebody who was displeased by what happened there, I'm not going to say it was the prosecutor, but he's the one whose recommendation didn't get followed, contacted the papers, contacted KSL, gave them a one-sided version of what happened. KSL took it as gospel, did not research it to find out the other side, ran their story, and it's based upon that one-sided story that Utah's elected officials, at least those mentioned, and one more that will be mentioned, took their marching orders. In other words, they got upset based upon a story that presented only one side of the situation. So hopefully they'll be doing mea culpa soon, apologizing to this judge and blaming it on KSL. That's what I expect to have happen. Also, there aren't enough prisons. I guess you got a prison shortage there in Utah, like everywhere else. At the sentencing hearing, Torgerson, the judge, noted that adult probation and parole had recommended that the 22-year-old man serve jail time instead of prison. Yeah, it's a multi-page. It's like, I don't know how long. 22 pages. I mean, this is a report. It's an investigation. It's a pre-sentence investigation. They go through everything, and I put this on here, these pictures, to show you. These are the people in adult probation and parole. These are people who just passed their test to go in there. Okay, this is law enforcement. Law enforcement's the one who recommended the same thing that the judge did. And there's their badge below, at least if you're in Cache County, which this isn't. The judge said he was largely following that recommendation when he sentenced the man to 112 days in jail. In Utah, adult probation and parole often conducts a pre-sentence investigation after someone is convicted, weighing a defendant's criminal history, age, and other factors to give a recommendation to judges on what sentence they should order. However, judges are not legally required to follow the recommendation. Well, of course they're not. They're the judge. That's what makes them the judge. They can do what they want, okay? Within certain guidelines, but they're not bound by anybody's recommendation. But when you're coming before a judge as a defense attorney and you have a recommendation to make for this treatment program, and they do DOC up here, but the AP&P down there does their pre-sentence investigation, and they come to the same conclusion, you basically got a shoe-in at that point. It would take something remarkable to keep a judge from following a place where the defense attorney, for good has recommended this alternative, and these guys at adult probation are also recommending the same thing. What it means is this guy really does deserve this opportunity, and he checks all the boxes for deserving it. Okay. There's Grand County. By the way, Stephen Stocks, he's the guy, the left guy on the left in the gray suit. I think that's Stephen. He's the one who I was taking umbrage at for what he had said. Grand County Attorney Stephen Stocks had asked Torgerson for a lengthier prison sentence, according to a recording of the sentencing obtained by the Salt Lake Tribune. This type of behavior and this type of charge demands, in the interest of justice for the children, that he be incarcerated in Utah State Prison, Stocks said. I think we heard that part. Now, this attorney over here, defense attorney Tara Isaacson, apparently she's represented some other people in other cases. That's Tara Isaacson right there, standing next to someone. Do you recognize who that is, Bill?
that would be the prophet Warren Jeffs.
Yes. I'm not sure she got as good a deal for him as she did for this client, but you know, some days you win, some days you lose. Some days you're the windshield, some days you're the bug.
She's got a Lady Diana haircut. I like it.
Defense attorney Tara Isaacson argued that a shorter jail sentence was appropriate for her client, noting that he is seeking treatment. He's not just, he's in treatment and was only 20 years old when he possessed the illegal images. She added that state legislators have crafted sentencing laws differently for young people under 21 who have committed sex crimes, and that's another thing. This is also a special law for people under 21, such as limiting the amount of time they spend on the sex offender registry to 10 years. I think the legislature has recognized that when offenses are committed when someone is younger, that the punishment and the consequences should not be as severe because of the immaturity of the defendant, she argued. Torgerson, the judge, noted that while prosecutors advocated for a zero-tolerance policy for defendants who possess child sex abuse material, the reality is a little different. I can't send everybody to prison who views child pornography, the judge said. There aren't enough prisons. There aren't enough prisons for people who are severe, extreme viewers of child pornography, like you. And he said an awful lot of things that he really didn't have to say. And I'm not sure that all of them were super advisable, but he's the judge. He gets to say what he wants to say within limits. And I don't think he went over any limits here. And I have been in front of judges who I do think went over limits with me. And I'll tell you about that someday. Investigators with the Grand County Sheriff's Office, acting on information from the Attorney General's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, identified a man who had 10 files depicting children being sexually exploited, according to court records. The man had possessed the files according to charging documents while he had been house sitting for a family member who lived in Moab. The Maine man, he's from Maine, was convicted of 2 counts of child sexual exploitation, which means I believe that he pleaded guilty to it. You are convicted either but when you plead guilty, okay, and the judge accepts your plea. That is called a conviction, as well as when the jury comes back as guilty. The Maine man was convicted of 2 counts of child sexual exploitation, carrying a sentence of up to 15 years each. But at sentencing last week, Torgerson opted not to impose a prison sentence, sentencing him to the 112 days he had already served and 4 years of probation. Okay. The man also must register as a sex offender and comply with other court-imposed requirements. See, I got a little sign there that says prison this way, alternative sentencing that way. Torgerson warned the man that if he violated his probation, he would send him to prison. And actually, he sentenced him to 30 years. He took both 15 years for each of the convictions for each guilty plea, gave him, I think it's the max of 15 years. And then he said consecutive 30 years. So you screw this up, you're doing 30 years in prison. The man's defense attorney said in a statement to the Tribune on Tuesday that Torgerson's use of the word privilege was taken out of context in previous news reporting. The first reference of privilege was referring to jail as a first for the man. The statement reads, and second, the man's ability to remain in Utah with his mother and engage in costly therapy. Wow, it's like just what I said. Was something that not everyone can do because of financial resources, family commitments, etc. They stressed that their client's sentence was entirely consistent with the guidance provided by the Utah legislature and the Utah Sentencing Commission. And here's this guy, this kid. He's in your legislature. Some of you in Utah voted for this kid. He has the distinction of being the youngest kid ever voted in. Representative Tyler Clancy, a Provo Republican and police officer, said on social media that the ruling was absolutely shocking. I bet he got his news from KSL. And a horrible message sent to victims of child sex abuse. Torgerson is the presiding judge in the 7th District, which covers Grand, Emery, Carbon, and San Juan counties. He was appointed to the bench in 2018 by Governor Gary Herbert. End of story. What do you think?
Bravo. It's a whole different perspective than what I thought was going to be covered. Because like I said, I've just been reading headlines, believing everything I read on KSL. So thank you. This is kind of investigative of you.
Well, this has taught me one thing. I don't follow KSL very much. I don't subscribe, but it's taught me not to take anything they say at face value.
And I'll just say, RFM, that it's quite helpful that you've got this experience in the legal arena, that covering the news often includes some sort of legal case, and your ability to explain that in a way that we all can walk away going like, oh, let's get beyond the headline. Let's get the story, as Rebecca was telling us. Yeah, I think it's just a big deal to have that expertise in this group. So I appreciate what you bring to the table.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you. Okay, so that's that story. And Rebecca, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we proceeded?
No, I just think you did an excellent job, because had I covered that story, which I was considering, over the last couple of weeks, I would have just kind of verbatim gone through KSL. I never would have understood what you were saying. So this is a big deal. No one else is talking about this from this perspective. So I hope this gets some play.
Yeah, and I was really excited to bash a judge. Nothing attorneys like better than to bash a judge and bring those high and mighty suckers down to the level that all of the rest of us mere mortals walk on. This just isn't one of those cases.
Yeah. That shows that we're fair and balanced here on the Mormon Newscast, right?
Yes. Mormon Newscast, unfair and imbalanced.
That's it. All right. Is it my turn? Is it my story now? Wow.
Is it Fairview?
It's Fairview. It's got to be my story. If you've noticed me looking around, there is a spider in my studio and it's coming toward me. I once read that if a spider were the size of a person, it could run 200 miles an hour. And that freaked me out. And this spider has gone, I would say, about 12 feet.
Well, that would be like Aragog, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's going to be over my head pretty soon. So if I stand up, start screaming and going like this, it's not some kind of a nervous attack. It's a spider. My gosh, it really is coming closer. Oh, maybe I can stick Alice, my dog, on the spider. I don't know if she'd do that. So anyway, all right. Fairview United. And this was breaking news during the last newscast on the 19th. But I wasn't able to report on it because it kind of came in very late. So I've had to wait 2 weeks to share this information. And really the only people I could talk to about this, I was on a vacation to New Mexico over Memorial Day. And there was an amazing group of post-Mormons that I got to connect with. And they threw this incredible party I got to attend. And I spent the whole time boring everybody by talking about Fairview. So thank you, amazing group of people. But that's just how I roll. I don't have any party conversation skills anymore. It's all temple.
We find your reporting endlessly fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. You said that. You sounded so sincere when you said that. So anyway, I have been covering, kind of what's been happening in Fairview with the potential to appeal because there was not a super majority, which may or may not have been needed. And sure enough, on the 19th Monday, that was the deadline. Fairview United, that is a residents group that goes by FU, did, through their attorney, file an appeal on the decision or on the vote that passed the conditional use permit to build the LDS temple there. And I thought this was really good coverage here. It says, Fairview residents challenge the temple approval vote, claim the protests were diluted, attorney says. And this has to do with that 200-foot radius that we've discussed before here on the newscast. So it says Fairview approved a temple plan by a 5-2 vote, but scrutiny has arisen over procedural protest zone issues. This all has to do with, when is a supermajority needed? The residents are saying it was needed right here. It didn't happen. Therefore, the temple was not really approved. So it says after more of a year of deliberation, the town of Fairview approved the plans. I think we know this part, 5-2. It's a shorter temple now. It's 120, but the residents are still like, nope. So here, this is kind of a picture of this 200-foot bubble that is drawn around where the temple is. And as we went through before on the newscast, there are certain conditions under which a supermajority is needed to pass something. One of them, of course, is the planning and zoning says we don't recommend. That didn't happen. But another condition is that 20% of the landowners, and that's based on the area that they own, say no. And the Fairview residents registered and documented and submitted 5 letters from 9 residences saying, we don't think this is a great project. The city calculated that to be only 17.9% based on overall land area. Does that make sense? Like one house is an acre, one house is another acre. The church, of course, is huge acreage. They add it all up and come up with the percentage. However,
is the statute specific that it's based upon the land size and not just the number of landowners?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? When I first read it, and I read it multiple times, and I ran it past several lawyers that I know, that you know too, and they said, no, it is land area, because it would seem very simple math. 5 out of 9 homes said no. No, it's land area. If you own more land, you have more of a sway in this. But something kind of irregular happened that we'll talk about. So their attorney that they've hired, Mark Johnson, said this is, let me go to the next slide here. This is 100% procedural. In other words, they've all said this has nothing to do with the temple. However, it may affect the temple. Johnson, the lawyer, stated, citing that under Fairview Code, if 20% or more of property owners within 200 feet protested development, a supermajority is needed to approve it. Again, they did not get a supermajority. That's 6-1. The crux of the issue lies in who was counted in the protest zone. And this is what they're hammering down on. Johnson claims that residents in the neighboring city of Allen were improperly included in that zone, despite not being on Fairview's tax rolls or receiving any notice. And this is exactly what happened. They
So part
drew
of the
this.
temple lot is actually abuts a different city.
Yeah. Well, 200 feet out from the temple lot.
Okay, so 200 feet out.
Some homes
within a
in
different
another city who legally cannot weigh in on this issue. Legally, were not needed to be notified because they can't weigh in on it. So because they couldn't weigh in and say, we don't want the temple, their property was counted as a non-no or a yes. That dilutes that opportunity to get 20%, if that makes sense. What you're saying is the people you represent are underrepresented in this. Johnson said, exactly. You can't include people who would never have the right to protest in the first place. So that Allen acreage, also some roads that they counted. The road can't say yes or no, but by these calculations, the road said yes in its dilution of that 20%.
Okay, so they're saying 20% of the property owners within 200 feet of the temple lot have to say no for it to require a supermajority. But when it came to calculating the 20%, they included all this area in another city and area on roads, which meant that this 20% had to be a lot big. The people saying no had to be a lot more or have a lot more property to constitute 20% on this bigger thing than if they had not counted all these other things.
Exactly. Every time you say, this is just a yes, it's a given, it dilutes that ability for them to reach 20%. So it says by including non-affiliated Allen residents in the protest zone at 200 feet, Johnson argues the percentage of valid objectors was diluted. Valid objectors are those 5 residences and their acreage, their area of their property. So it says you in fact dilute the authority of these property owners to challenge this. And that's true. By counting those, they really would never have the ability to reach 20% by how they had calculated this protest zone. Mayor John Hubbard, just 2 weeks into the job, acknowledges the concerns. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. So the residents knowing this, being aware of this, weighing this back and forth, I think they had 20 days to get it all together, talking to a lawyer, decided to appeal this. So what they did is they appealed to the Zoning and Adjustment Board, and they said, we want this reviewed. We possibly want this reviewed by the Attorney General. We need somebody to tell us, was this a miscalculation? By their calculations, if you recuse Allen and those properties and recuse the roads, they're well over 20%. Meaning the town council would have had a vote of 6-1 to pass it. They didn't, meaning the CUP for the LDS temple did not pass, if that makes sense. I know it's a little confusing.
No, it does. And actually, if I can just say it once more in a different way, just for anybody else out there, and I mentioned it to you on the phone a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about this, is that if the total circumference of the circle around the temple, whatever it is, if half of it is stuff that can't vote anyway.
Yes.
But you're including it, then the part that can vote, the other half.
Yeah.
All right. If you've got 20% in this other half, but you add all this other half of things that can't vote, now your 20% becomes 10%.
Yeah. You can never win. It's a losing.
You could. You just have to get more than 20%.
Yeah. But I mean, what if 75% in the protest zone belonged to another town that couldn't weigh in? Then you know what I mean?
75, that would make it more difficult.
It would make it extreme. And of course, they already have the temple lot there, and they're a guaranteed yes. And again, these properties don't have to say yes. They just have to not protest to be counted as a yes. There's another church in that area, and they're, of course, supportive of a church. But these Allen residents, I think the only way they could register a vote would be to maybe go to court and see if they could. Now, interestingly, many Allen residents spoke up at the town meetings very vocally for the temple, but they're not able legally to register any kind of vote. So it says, the appeal is currently under review by the town's legal counsel, said Mayor Hubbard, emphasizing the town's commitment to transparency. I think the town wants to get finality. Finally, yes, they do. We all do. The residents, I think it's good to get resolution, whatever happens. And that's true, because I feel like had they not appealed and the temple was built, everybody would always say, yeah, but you cheated. You know, there would be that feeling that they hadn't gone the limit as far as, you know, what could have happened. I think it's good to get resolution, whatever happens, then we can heal from this process. That's what they're looking at. The WFAA, that's the station reporting that, or the newspaper reporting this, reached out to the church, received the following response. We are just now becoming aware of this matter, which is interesting because I have been podcasting about this matter for over a month. Don't you watch my show? I would think that you did. It is an issue between the town of Fairview and its residents, and we have no comment at this time. Like the mayor says, this is not about the temple, but it can affect the temple.
Oh, yeah.
So it says, and this is a picture of their lawyer. Meanwhile, Johnson's clients remain firm. And again, this is Fairview United. 5-2 doesn't do it, Johnson said. The church's application wasn't approved. It was denied. I mean, that's kind of a bombshell right there. The case is now before the Fairview board, but the families say they are prepared to take the matter to court if necessary. The debate over the temple and the process that led to its approval shows no sign of ending soon. Oh my goodness, we're going to keep podcasting about this until the very end. Now, interestingly, if the zoning board of adjustments rules in the property owner's favor, meaning the calculation was incorrect and a super majority was needed, then the town will probably appeal, I would guess, to the district court. If it goes the other way and the calculation is ruled it is correct, then the residents would appeal. But there is a question of what kind of power does the Planning Board of Adjustments even have? And some very late breaking news from the town council meeting on Tuesday of last week, or Thursday of last week, is that they have they procured a lawyer, an attorney for the zoning board. So what do you think that means, RFM? The town is saying, I think the zoning board needs a lawyer.
I'm so sorry. This is catching me a little bit flat-footed. Here's the action the town council took this afternoon concerning the ZBA appeal. Motion. The town council has a serious concern that the town's board of adjustment may lack the authority or jurisdiction to hear the pending appeal over the issues concerning the town council's vote on the LDS CUP zoning ordinance, and move that the council take steps to engage special counsel to represent and advise the board of adjustment. I'm sorry. Yeah. They want to get a special attorney in there because obviously the city attorney really screwed this thing up.
Yeah. Something happened with that calculation. Yeah.
The city attorney's job is to make sure that this doesn't happen. Okay. And that they follow the law. So I don't know if he's going to be looking for a new job or if they're going to be more forgiving than I might be under this kind of circumstance. But that's why they got to get some attorney who maybe knows what the heck they're talking about.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Cody attorney, kind of. It seems like these attorneys are always, you know, no offense to attorneys, but causing some problems when it comes to passing temples. So
hey, anyway, 98% of attorneys give the rest of us a bad name.
And that's it, exactly. So anyway, that's the late breaking news that the town council is going, okay, they're going to appeal to the zoning board of adjustments. We got to get them some help. We don't want problems. We want this done transparently and above board, and we will see what happens. And it may involve the attorney general. But the big news, I guess, is just that the residents are appealing. So there you go.
By the way, since this all was, as I've said all along, kabuki theater.
Yes.
The church is just as much at fault for not researching this and making sure that they would have the votes.
Yeah, I think so too. Because I mean, I don't know what would have happened if at one of the meetings the attorney would have explained, I believe the residents have over 20%. Would the council then have made sure there was a super majority? You know, I don't know how that works. Yeah.
Yes, they would have.
Yeah, I think they probably would have. So anyway, that's where it stands at Fairview. And do we have any more comments on Fairview before I move on to very late breaking news within the last hour from Hero?
Wow.
I want to ask this, which is, let's assume the city messed up and that's what they find out that's what happened. What is the recourse? Do we know how the law plays out here? Does the church still get to build its temple? Does the city have to sort of go back and say, no, we actually didn't pass that?
It was denied.
Yeah. And they would have to probably take it to a district court is what I'm kind of hearing, depending on which way. But yes, it was denied. It did not pass. Now, the danger
4-2
here.
is a denial and 5-1
Yeah.
wins. And
Yeah. But the
Well,
church,
the church is the one who's going to have to get in there
they're
on the
going to have
side
to
of the
join with
city
the
now.
town. Yeah. This is what happens in every case. The church joins with the town to fight the residents who are trying to say the town did not fight for us or protect us. But of course, the danger here is the shorter temple conditional use permit not passed. What if the church just goes, that's it? We tried to play nice. We're back to the 173 feet, 43,000. What if they just do that? Anything can happen.
That's what's going to happen, I think.
Because
I don't think that the city can go back and say, "Oh, we need a supermajority. Let's do the vote again."
No, they would have to
got a
reapply.
supermajority this time. I think then it's going to be too obvious.
Yeah, they would have to reapply, I believe. But again, the attorney general may win. It kind of all hinges on who has the authority to even look at this and pronounce something, right? And I think there's a lot of wiggle room and they can take it to court back and forth. And so they still have their fund going on the Fairview United page if anybody is interested in, now they do have an attorney. And so anyway, very interesting. Okay, so Heber Temple. This is super late breaking news, and you can probably tell by my slides, they don't look very good because I made them in my car while I was driving. But I knew that it was in court for
You made
summary.
this in your car?
Yeah,
You
on
made
my
a slide
phone.
in
I
your
figured
car
out
while
how
you
to
were
make slides.
driving?
Yeah, well, I wasn't driving. I pulled over. But because I had somebody that was actually at this meeting today and was feeding me information. And I was like, I got to put this on a slide. I need a personal assistant to just follow me around everywhere, write down every word I say. This is what I need. So if anybody wants to volunteer. So this is breaking news on the Heber Valley Temple. Today, June 2nd, there was a hearing in the afternoon for summary judgment in the 4th District Court. And so it was a little confusing. I was even talking it over with Arvin. What does this mean exactly? But it means that instead of a trial, a judge is going to hear the different sides. It was oral arguments today and then kind of make a decision. Let's just get through this. Yeah. So I have some notes.
What it means is there's no issue of material fact for a jury to decide, and the judge can decide the case as a matter of law.
Right, exactly. So this is Judge Jennifer Mabee in the 4th District Court in Heber. And I do know that there was a big fast for this. I saw on social media, of course, that the residents were fasting in anticipation of this meeting today. And I love what my co-host Landon on Mormonish says. He says, fasting is wishing without food. I thought that was absolutely perfect. So wishing without food is what everybody was doing for the outcome of this case. So the person that I had in the courtroom was kind of sending me notes. So today, the 4th Circuit judge heard the arguments before the summary judgment. Here's a picture, a rendering of what this is a massive temple. If you remember reports on this before, 210 feet tall in the path of a runway. What?
Rebecca, who's bringing the motion for summary judgment?
The plaintiffs, the residents. The residents are saying, we want this.
They want, okay, so what is it they want?
They want the judge to make a ruling.
About what?
About the temple that okay, that sounded very simplistic. So what happened in Heber is the temple is being built on county land, not city land. And so unbeknownst to many, many people, the county commission passed a legislative development agreement. That means it doesn't go before any vote, nothing like that. They just kind of unilaterally say, yes, you can build this. And they overturned existing dark skies and height ordinances that had been there in the area for over 20 years, just like that, without anybody knowing. And we've reported on this before. Some of the people on the board and the planning commission were there at the groundbreaking, standing there with a golden shovel right beside President Nelson. So the residents tried a lawsuit for dark skies. They ran out of money on that. They tried to get this legislative development agreement on the ballot. They didn't get enough signatures. They've just been trying all along. So this is the last lawsuit from some residents that just say this was done. I don't want to use the word illegally, but there were some, there were just some problems with how it was done because no one in the community got to weigh in at all. It was just presented. Yes, we're overturning dark skies ordinance. And yes, we're overturning height. Go ahead and build your temple. So that's kind of where we stand. I know I forget that not everybody dreams about this every night like I do. So anyway, I'll go through this here. So what the church, who is has joined with the town to fight their own residents. This is what they said when they gave oral presentations to the judge. First of all, they said that the plaintiffs, the residents, they don't have any standing because they don't live in the land planning jurisdiction that applies to this area. That's their main argument. You don't even have standing to bring this suit because you don't live in this county land. You live in the city. That seems to be splitting hairs. They also said that the
an
land.
important distinction to me.
Yeah, I think so too. But that's what they said. Okay, so the land development agreement is valid because the commission was voted in, right? The citizens voted for the county commission, and they represent what the people want. So they can just do it. You voted for me, I can do it. You don't need to know what I'm doing, but I did it, right? That's another argument. These are very simplistic as I'm describing them. Another thing that the church and the city together through their attorney said was, as long as there's a benefit to the county, it should stand, right? They did the right thing. They did the right thing, overturning everything so that this temple can be there because it's going to benefit the county. The next thing is the temple will bring an economic benefit to the area. Will it? Will it bring a tax base? Don't even get me started on that.
Those last two things just don't seem to me to be appropriate in a summary judgment.
Yeah, this is what
First
they're
two
saying.
do. The first two do.
They did mention that there would be a benefit to wedding planners. This is a destination temple, and there are going to be all kind of people coming who are getting married. So that's a benefit. And I, of course, know that this temple is there simply because there's a girls' camp that operates all summer long, and they're just going to bring busloads of kids to do baptisms for the dead. So anyway, economic benefit. The temple will build community and be a gathering place. And they actually said residents can walk on the grounds and use the bathroom.
I'm there.
I question that. I question anyone in the chat. Can you go into the temple and use the bathroom?
No, of course you can't.
I'd like someone to try it
You
somewhere.
can if you're a resident who also has a temple recommend. That's the part they didn't say.
Yeah, but they said, it's going to be a community available for everyone to walk on the grounds. Again, there are limitations to that. I do know that. So interesting argument. And then they said 800 of the 900 messages, emails, whatever, to the town were in favor of the temple. Well, we all know why that was, because as reported, the church asked everybody to send emails. I mean, we've seen this over and over. You guys know the drill. So those were some of the arguments from the church and the town's lawyers in front of this judge. Now, the residents basically kind of disputed everything that was said there. And two of their major points were they did not notify anybody in the county of really what was up for bid, if that makes sense. They didn't send out a simple summary or description that said, hey, everybody, we're going to overturn all your dark skies ordinances, and we're going to overturn all your building height stipulations. They did not send anything like that out. So no one even knew what was happening to be able to object.
But these are residents of Heber, right?
Yeah, Heber.
See, they're not in the county, and the temple's built in the county. That's what this whole summary judgment motion, I think, hinges on. Yeah,
and you're right. You've absolutely got it. You don't even need to read my slide. The next steps, the judge said, is perhaps some more briefs. She said, maybe you guys write up some more stuff. They kind of pushed back and said, no, we've already said all we have to say, but she's asking for more briefs. The main thing, you caught it, the judge is going to determine if there's even standing. And this is what happened in Lone Mountain. They determined that the residents group didn't even have standing to oppose, and it was just dismissed. And this may happen here. My person in the courtroom did say that the judge has made a decision before on a land development agreement that was then appealed and overturned by a higher judge. And so she might be concerned about that. So my person in the courtroom's prediction is that they'll just dismiss it because of no standing.
Probably. Now, to be fair, the no standing argument is what's being used by Fairview citizens in order to challenge the vote and say a supermajority was needed.
You're absolutely right. So, I mean, everybody can use that, and that can be something that just cuts through it right there. So that's kind of where we stand. But I mean, I don't even think there's an article out about this yet. It's funny. Sometimes I'll post something and someone will go, where'd you get that? I don't see an article. And I'm like, I make the news. It's my news. So, but hopefully tomorrow something will come out and I'll post that for people to see. So I did want to bring up one more thing about Heber. Oh my goodness, the whole look and feel of Heber is changing with this new temple. And this, have you guys heard of this? There is a Book of Mormon sculpture garden that has just broken ground in Heber City. This is a retired plastic surgeon, and he has a dream, and he's going to build it. And they had a big groundbreaking with a lot of notable people that attended. It's called the Monument of the Americas. It's been 30 years in the making, and it's kind of up on a hill, almost a place where I thought might be an alternative temple site, but instead they're launching this. It's kind of, I think, up by the UVU campus. If you're familiar with this, they're going to be, I think, upwards of 80 sculptures, and you can guess what it is. The Book of Mormon Sculpture Garden. It's sort of that melding of American history and the Book of Mormon. We've seen a lot of that. So it basically says it's going to feature a waterfall cascading over a wall designed to look like the golden plates, if you can picture that. And the crown jewel of the garden is going to be an 18-foot tall statue of Jesus. And the most important part is it will be lit up at night.
Yes.
Of the sculpture, and you will be able to see it from all parts of the valley.
Hooray for Israel.
Yep. Hurrah. You have to say
hurrah for Israel. Sorry, David.
Yeah. So not only will the temple light everything up, but the sculpture garden will be lit up also at night, and you'll be able to see that. And I'm pretty sure that's why people go to that area from out of state. They want to see these things. There were local and state leaders that were here at the groundbreaking. Even former Governor Gary Herbert. He said that the United States founding cannot be separated from the story of the LDS Church. No way to separate it. Can't at all.
Kind of true when you read 1 Nephi 13.
Yeah, well, there is that. He said, I believe the founding fathers were raised up by God for the LDS. That's exactly right. We know that part of the LDS scripture is to have this country ordained by Heavenly Father. So it's going to show Book of Mormon stories. It's going to show Americana, American history stories, and it's all going to be put together on a 12-acre site. They already have $3 million of cash donations. So people really care about this. And I would suggest everybody go up and see it. Right now, all they have is a statue of George Washington and Jesus, and I think a few other things in place, because this was just the groundbreaking. But my whole point of showing this is just that the whole look and feel of Heber Valley, Utah, if you're familiar with this is skiing, this is outdoor, this is dark skies, this is people from out of state building billion-dollar cabins. I feel like it's all going to change now. So
way over there on the right, I think I see the windmill at the 18th hole.
Yeah. That could be it.
That was always the hardest one for me to get the golf ball through.
Yeah, that's it. But here are some more pictures. There's George Washington. There's Jesus. It's going to be really interesting to see it being put together. But I think a lot of the longtime residents of Heber are just, their heads are spinning, because it's about 50-50 LDS, not LDS. And I don't know what residents who aren't LDS think about this, but $3 million worth of donations, that's pretty big.
That would buy you what, about 1.5 of these sculptures?
I think maybe it would. Yeah, I think maybe it would. So that's the end of my temple reporting. If we don't have any more comments, I think we all covered that. I think you have the next story.
I do, and I'm going to circumscribe this story into one great whole. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Bill?
Nope, I'm all good.
Okay, very good. All right. So this is Jana Reese's article where she synopsized some of her interview with John Turner, the author of the forthcoming, it may already be out. It was June, right? And we're June 2nd.
I think the 17th is when it actually drops. You can pre-order.
Thank you, Rebecca. On Joseph Smith. So Jana Reese talks to him about polygamy because she says, I know it sounds crazy, John, but there's these people out there who actually are saying that Joseph Smith didn't practice polygamy. Do you think that's a possibility? And he goes, no way. Okay, that's that story in short. But
is he LDS?
Who? I'm sorry, who? No, he's not. No,
he's not. That's what I think. He's just a historian looking through things, and he's going, oh, no. Yeah, he did.
So I guess he's not seeing those shadows of the camels. And if you know, you know. But this is the book he wrote over a decade ago. Do you know what I mean? How's the spider doing?
You know what? It's really close.
Because I'm starting to hear the Jaws music.
I'm going to see if I can catch it in my mug. Oh my gosh.
Spider in the cup. Okay. Well, be sure and scream or something if it drops on you.
Yeah, if my camera goes off, you'll know what happened.
Brigham Young, pioneer prophet. He wrote this. This is a pretty well acclaimed book, but now he's done Joseph Smith, The Rise and Fall of an American Prophet. So this is a big deal. There is John Turner. I think he's a professor over at Mason University. Here he is. And what these slides have are questions and answers. Now, you can check those out if you want to come back and look at them. Please do. There's money. Says he wouldn't trust. He says he finds Joseph very, a lot of fun, charismatic, really, really curious about things. On the other hand, he's got some problems as well, and he wouldn't trust Joseph with his wife or his daughter. That's what Professor Turner says. Yeah, and as to not trusting him with your wife or daughter, here's what he said. Joseph pursues plural marriage so recklessly. This is John Turner. Regardless of whether one accepts plural marriage as a divinely instituted principle for that time and place or not, Joseph goes about it with a disregard for existing human relationships on earth. He proposes to the wives of some of his followers, including some close followers, and he proposes to Sidney Rigdon's daughter. Even Brigham Young was worried Joseph Smith was going to take his wife. Did you know that? Even Brigham Young was worried Joseph Smith was going to take his wife. Brigham Young had this dream. And Janet asked him the question. That was an interesting story you recounted of Brigham Young having a nightmare about seeing his first wife being driven off in a carriage with Joseph Smith. Wow. Let's get an expert in interpreting dreams to figure that one out. John Turner says, yeah, of course, I'm interpreting the dream. Brigham Young's not on record as saying, I'm worried that Joseph's going to ask for my wife as an Abrahamic sacrifice. But he continues, I don't think it's subtle. If I were a close associate of Joseph's in 1842 or 43, I really would have been on edge. I probably would have been thrilled at some of the other ideas and rituals that he was unveiling during those years, but I wouldn't necessarily trust him. And then she asked the $1 million question, the one I wanted to focus on. Recently, she says, we've seen a rise in what some scholars are calling polygamy denial, with some Latter-day Saints now claiming Joseph Smith never practiced polygamy, or at least not sexual polygamy. What do you think? Now that you've just written this huge book about Joseph Smith, and you wrote one about Brigham Young that was publicly acclaimed, okay, what do you think, John? Here's what he says. The evidence for Joseph's polygamous sealings is pretty overwhelming. It's true that a lot of that evidence is retrospective in the form of affidavits or court testimony from many decades later, but there are some persuasive pieces of evidence from the 1840s. The William Clayton Journal is a very exhaustive account of Joseph's plural marriages, Joseph's own and his promotion of the marriages of others. There's the revelation on marriage itself. And while it's true that you can't necessarily trace the extant copies of those documents to 1843, the sum total of the evidence is simply overwhelming. He goes on. And there's a lot of corroborating evidence in Joseph's own journals and the journals of his associates. I think it boggles the mind, John Turner says. I think it boggles the mind to presume Brigham Young introduced polygamy after Joseph's death, and then so many people conspired in such incredibly clever ways to corroborate Joseph's polygamy. A few years ago, I saw Don Bradley at Sunstone. Our paths crossed, and I mentioned to him about this idea that was starting to get a little traction about Joseph not practicing polygamy. And I asked, and I had mentioned that there are historians who think that, and he corrected me. Don Bradley did. He says, "I am not aware of any historians who." Here we go. I am not aware, says Don Bradley, of any historians who believe that Joseph Smith did not practice polygamy. And apparently, since John Turner's a historian, and he comes down on the same side, it's still historians, apparently universal on this subject. And there are no historians who support it. All right. Oh, and there's Jeremy Hoop. I thought I'd put him up there too. So she asked him, so why do you think some Latter-day Saints are so determined to absolve Joseph Smith of involvement in polygamy? Some of this has come up in my research on Mormon faith crisis, with people very much wanting to maintain Joseph Smith on a pedestal. That's Jana Reese's question. John Turner responds, Joseph's activity in terms of plural marriage is very uncomfortable material. He pursues it so assiduously, in my opinion, recklessly, in ways that were very hurtful to Emma Smith. I mean, Emma Smith clearly understands this as a moral betrayal. And then he says, then she asks, you have a poignant moment in the biography. I tell you what, we're almost at 2 hours, and I know there's some more stories. And that was the main point I wanted to make. So I'm going to show this slide. If you want to go back and screen grab it, freeze frame it, whatever you want to do, and read that, that's just fine. Talking about Joseph and Emma. He mentioned some things that he admires about Joseph. I think I should include this because we don't talk about the positive things that much. John Turner says, one thing that often gets lost is that Joseph had a capacity for mirth, for joy and humor and playfulness. And that's really the main thing. And he says that historian Richard Bushman had this very fair complaint that no one is taking Joseph Smith seriously outside of the Mormons. And John Turner says he thinks, as a non-Latter-day Saint, that John Turner, wants to take him seriously. He finds his ideas and activities arresting and potent, but I also don't want to strip all the fun out of his story. And he says, I also admire the creativity of his religious mind. And that's the end of that story.
There were quite a number of comments from those in the camp of non-polygamy on that article. If you go into the Salt Lake Tribune and kind of read what people were responding. So,
oh, yeah, all the non-historians. Look, when all the historians are on one side of an issue, you might want to think that they could be right. I know it's exciting and, you know, it's all fun thinking that you found the secret answer to the riddle that allows you to maintain belief in Joseph Smith as a prophet of God, but it's not true.
well, I'm excited for the book to come out. I think
Yeah,
it's
me too.
really,
Me too.
really, really good. So,
So I'm sure we got at least one more story here. Do you know whose this is, Bill? It was about.
Yeah, I added this.
Oh, sure. Okay.
I added this, and I'll just speak for 2 seconds and we can move on from it. But somebody put a Facebook post out today noting that there's this building that says the Remnant Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So there is a new RLDS Church. So we began our show tonight with a comment about the RLDS Church, the Community of Christ, the formerly reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was not aware. I knew the Remnant existed, Denver Snuffer, that whole thing. I did not know that they were using physical buildings solely for the purpose of their churches. So it's a full-blown movement at that point. As far as I knew.
You're sure that these are the same people? This is a Denver Snuffers group?
That's my understanding.
where is this building?
I don't know. I saw this on Facebook, and so I was putting it here just because we started off with the RLDS story. I wanted to put an RLDS story at the end that I saw on Facebook today, and I didn't get a chance to do a bunch of research, but they have their own Facebook page, Remnant Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My understanding, because that's what Denver calls that group, right? The Remnant?
You see, that's the thing, and that's why I wonder. A lot of things can be happening without my noticing it over with Denver Snuffer and what he's doing. But for years, they had this difficulty because nobody could come up with a name for them. There was no official name. So Snufferite starts getting used. Or the Remnant gets thrown around, right? Just the Remnant, not the Remnant Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as an official title. That would have had to have happened when I wasn't paying attention. And it certainly may have. If it is, it's an important thing to know.
I'm just going to put their website up. We can just do this in real time.
We got to look into this. I'm Googling right now, trying to figure out, is this the Snufferites or if this is more the Phil Davis group?
Here's the website, Remnant Church of Jesus Christ.
Interesting.
And I'm going to try to find an about here.
Oh, Landon is saying it's in Independence across from the Temple lot. Now that's interesting. So I'm not sure if it's the same Denver Snuffer group.
Our leadership. Let's look at that. First presidency, Terry Patience is
Now
the
we go
prophet.
down the rabbit hole.
This is not.
No.
Well, I'm in the wrong spot here. Let me take this down. Put this up. So this is their website. I'll just go back to here. Website.
Well, that's quite the building.
Yeah, I
There's
went
the 4
down
members.
here. Right here. Our mission, our leadership. So Terry Patience is their prophet. Mike. So this is not Denver Snuffle. Michael Hogan, David Van Fleet. Those are the counselors. Presiding bishopric. So there's a whole new group of these guys. That the whole need for a restoration got really clouded up over the years, since so many different churches claim to be the one true church functioning as an outgrowth of Mormonism.
Well, if the Mormon Church were the Catholic Church 200 years into Christianity, then we would have our power backed by the Roman Empire, and we would just get rid of all these other people.
Yeah, their leaders are allowed beards, so there's a positive.
I'm just surprised they're allowed to use the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and then just tack remnant on it.
Yeah, you guys want to start a church? We can come up with a word.
I would love to start a church. Can I be in the
How
first
about-
presidency?
Of course, you can be the president, but it's got to be the RFM Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Fine. You have more name recognition. I'll be on board with that. Well, we're going to have to do some research on this, and maybe
Anyway, I'll take it down.
next week try to talk about this, because I wasn't aware, but it's on the temple lot, which the temple lot the LDS do not own, and neither does the Church of Christ. It's owned by another little group. So interesting. It's hard to keep
Yes.
track.
So is that all the stories? I just reminded myself that I'm
Yeah,
the
no,
anchor.
I have-
there's more.
Yeah,
about
no,
garments
there's
and
more.
women.
I have a quick one, because this involves our friend John DeLynn. So I thought this was important to talk about, because again, and I'll go through this quickly, everybody
Is John
is
DeLynn
talking-
wearing women's garments again?
That's it. That's the story. So we can stop now. No, totally kidding. Do not clip that soundbite. No, there was, okay, I've been talking about the tank top garment because I think I very early on saw, the fire that would be ignited from this in post-Mormons, in faithful Mormons everywhere. And again, I'm going to put out my theory that the church never intended for this. They were just going to release slip, half slip, tank top garment in African countries where it's more conducive to their dress and the converts there. They were never going to make a big deal of it. And I think, I've talked to some marketing people who are like, yeah, it has all the earmarks of something that was accidentally released. And then they had to kind of backpedal on it. But now it has found its way into the New York Times. What are garments? What are they about? What have they been? What are they now? What do women think? This is a big deal. And this article in the New York Times was picked up by other newspapers. So this is everywhere. I can't even tell you what a big deal this is as far as Mormonism goes and the garment and kind of saying things out loud, right? Revealing the undergarment. So it was also reprinted in the Salt Lake Tribune. And I think it's interesting because if you look back here, it says Mormon women, right? But what have they changed it to in the Salt Lake Tribune? Women, Latter-day Saint women. So they made that little tweak right there, which I thought was interesting. But our friend, John DeLynn, is quoted in the New York Times article. They talked to him about it because I would say he has his finger on the pulse of what Mormons or LDS women and post-LDS women are thinking, because he's done a lot of research, done a lot of scholarship, done a lot of studies, and just talked to people. So in the New York Times, it says, John DeLynn, the host of the podcast Mormon Stories, said he had interviewed hundreds of women, both practicing and former members of the faith. I would say close to all of them expressed significant discomfort, if not aversion to wearing garments, he said. The women said the garment made them feel frumpy, contributed to body shame or negativity, affected their sex life and their partners. And it says the church seems to be listening, and many young women are thrilled. And I will
Can I
say,
just say that John DeLynn right there is being appropriately quoted as an expert on the subject because of his podcast and all the women he's interviewed.
exactly. And it clearly says his statements are based on the women that he has interviewed, the research that he has done. And I can corroborate that because I spend a lot of time on faithful social media and the faith, and I've been called on this, faithful women say, these are hard to deal with, right? I know it's hard for everyone to hear, but yes, faithful women come forward and ask for help from other faithful women on social media saying, how do you deal with this? Infections or heat rash or just, uncomfortable. So it's a real thing. But anyway, so then what happened is in the in the Deseret News, there is an opinion piece. I need to be clear. I misstated. I said article a couple times.
Yes,
And
yes.
it makes a difference that it is an opinion piece. So this is somebody's opinion who has come out and kind of given John DeLynn some heat for daring to weigh in on this, which I think is funny. The headline of the article, can you read that little thing down on the left-hand side of RFM? It's too small. Like I put this together at the end. This is hilarious to me.
I'm sorry, on the left-hand side?
Yeah, underneath the headline, the sacred undergarment. See that little square under there?
Online, the title of the Des News opinion piece, not an article, this does matter. Okay.
Mhm.
Is maybe male critics are not experts on religious women's underclothing. So that was the headline for the opinion piece in the Deseret News.
Yeah.
Maybe male critics are not experts on religious women's underclothing. Boy, it sounds like the headline is all about John DeLynn, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Which
the
is a-
headline is all about John DeLynn, but the person is saying men shouldn't weigh in. I'm like, well, men are the ones that stuffed us into these garments in the first place. So what an ironic statement. So yes, that is the title. Can you read the title one more time, RFM, and then I'll get into what it says.
Yes, what it says is maybe church leaders are not experts on religious women's underclothing. That's what it
Yeah.
should say.
That's what it should say, but what
It
does
says
it really
maybe male
say?
critics are not experts
Yes.
on religious women's underclothing.
Right, male critics, and they are talking about John DeLynn and his comments in the New York Times. So it says, again, opinion piece, garments are probably not in the New York Times because they're inherently interesting, but as part of the continuing discussion about the place of institutions and religious authority in our lives. To that end, John DeLynn, a former member whose podcast criticisms of the church is asked to weigh in on Latter-day Saint women's feelings. I would say here again, asked to weigh in on Latter-day Saint women's feelings. That doesn't sound like scholarly research that John does. It just sounds like he's trying to speak for women, right? I take exception to that. He says, I would say close to all of them express significant discomfort, if not aversion to wearing garments. Okay?
And what is not put in this opinion piece is his basis for making that
Exactly.
statement.
Yep. They never mentioned based on interviews, based on scholarship, based on surveys, based on research. No, they make it sound like he's just making that blanket statement without anything to back it up. This seems a bit like asking Martin Luther how Catholics feel about the Pope. Unless there's something compelling reason to believe DeLynn's ongoing criticism of the institutional church is not coloring his perception of how its members feel, sourcing him here is mind-bogglingly weird. It is not mind-bogglingly, if you can say that, weird. He is an authoritative source through, as we mentioned, his research and his degree and his interviewing for the last, how many decades. So I just think it's interesting that this opinion tries to throw him under the bus where his statement is based on, who he is and his research.
It is, but ultimately the unstated conclusion that they're trying to throw on you is the Mormon women love their freaking garments. They got no problems with the garments.
Yep. Nope.
In fact, they hate the fact that now there's got tank top garments because there's less garments for them to love.
But again, this is why garments have caught fire, because faithful women are weighing in and saying, oh, thank God, I've always hated them. Post-Mormons are going, wait, what now? It's a huge firestorm. And I just very quickly wanted to show you how much social media is talking about garments in all kinds of different ways. Everybody's wondering, are there going to be short sleeveless wedding dresses? I found one. Here it is in the wild. Outside of the temple, it is sleeveless. And she is married. She's standing outside. She looks beautiful, but it is a sleeveless. It's nothing like I had to wear where you had a, down to up to, nothing like that. Now, however, I did look in the church handbook, and I'll try to be quick here, but it definitely says that inside the temple, you have to wear something that looks like a temple dress, meaning sleeves. You're not going to be wearing your sleeveless wedding dress in the temple. And in fact, if you do happen to show up with something that doesn't have the appropriate sleeve, have you ever heard of this? A woman's bridal modesty jacket.
It looks like a bolero.
Yeah, it does look like a bolero. It has little buttons and long sleeves. So for those who are saying, and they're saying it all over the place, the garment was never about modesty. Don't even get me started on that. Here's your bridal modesty jacket if you show up in the temple with a wedding dress that has no sleeves. Here is a camp list I came across. Like I said, garments in the news everywhere, where they, let's see, I think is that too small for me to read? Do you want to read that circled area of what they're supposed to bring to camp here?
Can you read that, Bill? And also, did you have something you wanted to say earlier?
Oh, I don't remember what it was. It's okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm over talking, trying to get done.
No, we're good. So pants must cover knee, shirts must cover belly and shoulders, no tank tops, Swimsuit must completely cover your body.
No, wait.
I don't
Come
know
on.
what that is.
What kind of swimsuit is that?
I don't
A
know. We're
very
going back,
tight-fitting wetsuit.
110 years to the beach.
I
Yeah.
remember
Coney
now, by
Island?
the way, if women love their garments so much, then why in the hell do they change them so often? You know, Joseph F. Smith was the one, I think, who originally put the battle up and said, no, we're not changing that stuff.
Yep.
And
They were going to.
they've been changed 1,000 times since. So somebody's not happy.
No, and again, these modesty standards for girls at camp do not apply to their moms. Their moms can wear tank tops. Their
Swimsuit
moms can
must
wear.
Okay.
completely
Let me
cover
try
your
and
body.
be charitable as much as I can, okay? Because I think that by body they must mean torso.
Yeah,
right?
I'm sure that they mean a one-piece swimsuit. I'm sure what they mean. But I just think it's interesting that the standards for the moms are now different for the teens because moms can wear tank tops. Moms can wear pretty short skirts, as we've seen on some of the influencers, but the teenagers can't. So that's going to be an interesting fight between mother and daughter, right? Mom, you're wearing a tank top. You're not until you wear garments. Then you can wear a tank top. Anyway, it just is getting crazy. And I thought, how are people learning about garments? You know, how are they figuring out? You've got them in the New York Times. You've got Secret Lives of Mormon Wives openly discussing garments. One character, Jen, wears them. She was upset last season that she'd forgotten them when she went to Chippendales. Yeah, I'm not making this up. But look at this here. 1 billion downloads of, or viewing of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I just had to do some stats on conference. You got 789 that watched on YouTube when you add up all the sessions. You got 98,000-ish that attended in person. You got like 890,000 that viewed conference. And of course, it'll continue to be viewed and used, but there's no way that it's going to get to 1 billion. So this is where people are getting their information. Places like the New York Times and Secret Lives from Mormon Wives.
Well, so it's not even up to 1 million watching it on conference.
No,
through
not
those
even up to
various
1
platforms.
million.
But
No.
1 billion, which is 1,000 million, have already watched about garments on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. This is where they're getting their information about Mormonism. It's not from conference. So, and again, if you do the stats on number of active members that they claim, over 17 million, how many there watched it, like 5%. So there's something wrong there. Anyway, another thing I thought was funny, again, the gaslighting has begun. This person on social media said it was never a rule that you had to wear garments outside of the temple. Once you're married, it was just a toxic cultural thing. And I'm hoping that we're breaking down these toxic expectations. Yeah. I don't even think I need to make a comment on that. However, I did include this picture because I'll tell a very brief story from college. When I was in college and I was running with the same boyfriend that was sick, he was wearing shorts like that, right? It was the early 80s. It was okay. We were out running. I was wearing running tights. And the next Sunday, the bishop asked to talk to us. And I thought, oh, okay, interesting. Are we going to get a calling or what's going to happen? He goes, I saw you guys out running. And I saw that you, talking to my boyfriend, who is a returned missionary, did not have your garments on, but you were wearing dolphin shorts, right? So to try to, and he read him the riot act. You should be wearing your garments. You should not be wearing dolphin shorts.
When you're running?
Yeah, when you're running. This is what I'm saying. Now, maybe you shouldn't be wearing dolphin shorts. That's a whole different story. But it's
I don't
a
even know
real
what dolphin
thing.
shorts are. Do you know what dolphin shorts are, Bill?
Don't you see those? You grew up, you're older than I am. You know it. You probably had a pair. You don't remember these?
I did not know anything about dolphins.
I just find it hard to believe that you wouldn't have worn these in PE.
I'm not saying I didn't wear them. I'm just saying I never heard about dolphin shorts. By the way, as faithful as I was, I did not, nor did I think it would be appropriate to wear my garments in ballet class.
That's right. But you do have that story about the professor that knew you were LDS because you had 2 shirts on. So yeah. Anyway, just this idea, everybody keep a watch out. People are starting to say, no one ever tells you to wear your garments. You just did that on your own. So this is just heating up everywhere with all kinds of different opinions, and people are basically making stuff up. It's kind of crazy. All right. One last thing here. And I know Bill had touched on this before, but if you want to get rid of your garments, right, it's a problem. My parents used to cut the marks out and fry them up in the frying pan until they were cinders and then throw those away. Yeah, exactly.
That's good eating.
That thing right there that I just said probably explains why I podcast. But then you have the fabric, right? Sometimes it's just bags laying in your closet forever. Celestial Recycling, you sign up, you can get a bag, large size, $40. Price goes down from there. You stuff your garments in them. They have to be clean, not bloody. Makes that clear, or soiled. You send them in. They never open the bags, but they shred them.
Well, how do they know if they're bloody?
They just trust you. I have no idea.
They shouldn't be trusting me.
They said the bag will
You're
never
not
be
kidding.
open.
This is not a joke. This is a real thing.
This is real. And it was in the paper again this week. I know that we had touched on it a month ago, but it was in the paper again. And so they promise they will never open the bag once it's been sealed by your hands. So those marks will never be seen by human eyes again. And then they are shredded commercially. And then a fine pulp results from that. And then that's used as fuel at a cement factory. So it's eco-friendly and you can get rid of your garments that way. So you don't have to worry about cutting out marks, frying in the frying pan, whatever it is that you do. So anyway, interesting.
How much does this cost? Because I may give these people a call.
Yeah. Like I said, the large bags are $40 and then it goes down from there. You drop them off at a location, or if you're not near a location, you mail it in at your own expense. And it's called Celestial Recycling.
So they're going to have people who are just trying to cram these bags just so full, they're going to break the zippers and everything, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, it's a pretty innovative idea. And a lot of people say they can't believe the church hasn't come up with this already, like a recycling center. You take it back to a distribution center. But getting rid of garments, you see this post on social media all the time. Oh, I just came across a bag in the back of my closet. It's kind of cathartic for people to just not worry about how they throw them away. So anyway, I will continue to talk about garments because, it's kind of a spotlight shown on all craziness of Mormonism. So I think that's all I have about garments. One last thing, I just couldn't let it go before this. And you know what? Maybe I'll make RFM read this. Over the weekend, two letters were sent to different stakes from stake presidents in Ohio. And they are regarding letters that were sent out to all the Amish in Ohio, right? Now, there was some confusion at first about exactly what this was, but I found out that the missionaries were involved in the Columbus, Ohio mission simply by addressing the envelopes. The letters were written by former members of the Amish community, and the stake wanted to let everybody know that they can help participate in, the result of what happened from mailing these letters. RFM or Bill, do you guys want to read this?
This is going from the church, the LDS Church, to the Amish?
Yeah, what it is it'll kind of explain it in the letters, but former Amish members who are now LDS members wrote letters to every member of the Amish community that
they're Mormons now.
They're Mormons now. They're Mormons now.
Okay.
And they had the Columbus, Ohio mission get involved by addressing the envelopes. Then the mission president let the stakes in the area know what was happening and how members could also participate in this. And this letter and another letter like it that was sent to me were put out to the stake. So it'll be more clear if you read it.
Boy.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, are you up for reading this thing?
I would love to. So Kirtland, Ohio stake. So this was just close to where I grew up.
Oh, yeah.
About an hour and a half east of me, Kirtland, Ohio, of course. Historical site for the church. Dear brothers and sisters, a special opportunity to add our faith and voices in prayer and fasting to those of some of our brothers and sisters was shared with us earlier this week by President so-and-so of the Columbus, Ohio mission. He shared that over a decade ago, a few families that had joined the church from the Amish community and have continued faithful and been a strength to the church even as they endured difficult challenges, such as having been shunned by many in their communities. They have felt to write a letter in a spirit of love to seek an end to the practice of shunning and to share the joy they have felt through the truths of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ that they have fully embraced. This letter was recently sent to thousands of homes, and the families that sent it have invited us to include the Amish community in our prayers and fasting this Sunday. Upon thinking about this invitation, many things come to mind, including the goodness and humility of our brothers and sisters inviting us to join them, as well as the goodness of so many of our brothers and sisters to whom they sent. Oh, and it ends there.
Yeah. And somebody on social media said, oh, an organization that shuns pleads with another organization not to shun. Oh,
I've said this so many times in the show and other places too, but like Elder Christofferson gives a famous conference talk where he starts off the talk saying, "Oh, isn't it sad that there's some Amish people and they joined our community and they got shunned. And that was horrible. It was horrible. And if members of the church don't behave, you should shun them."
Yeah, it was the same talk. It was amazing. It's 15 minutes, and he gets both of those sentiments in there.
I know. Anyway, this letter, lots and lots of people have been weighing in, and I'm sure it's very well meant, and I'm sure these people are lovely, but just the irony, and a lot of people push back when I made posts on this and saying the LDS Church does not shun. And, they formally shun and they informally shun. I know some people can't see it, but I think a lot of us have experienced it. And just so interesting, and thousands of Amish people, a stamp costs like 70 cents. How much money is this? So I don't know. Somebody made the comment, the Amish are the only ones who haven't been able to view Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. So they may be the only field that's white and ready for harvest that's left out there. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. And last thing.
Don't you think before you tell people not to shun, you probably ought to end the shunning in your own community?
It's the moat and the beam, right? RFM, that I always get mixed up. Look for the shunning in your own eye before you.
Is that the moat or the beam, Rebecca? That's what I get confused on.
Yeah, no, you don't, but I do. So anyway, I'll just say do not shun lest you yourself be shunned.
Oh,
that is the answer. And then one last slide, just happy Pride Month to everybody. We needed to mention that it's June. And here in Utah, I have seen it called Proclamation Month. And that is because you will see, and it's already popping up all over social media, people are flying the Proclamation to the Family flag. And I even found that you can wear it if you'd like. There's even a tank top if you want to wear the tank top garments with it. So people are definitely pushing back on pride by saying that this is Proclamation Month, because of course the Proclamation to the Family says marriage is between one man and one woman. So.
Here's the thing, okay? I have said for a long time that the proclamation to the world about the family is an anti-gay, actually LGBTQ. It covers all of my thing. Plus, it's an anti-document is what it is. That's the whole purpose of it. And if you know the foundation and how it came to be, it makes perfect sense that that's what it is. It's all fluff except for that part, and that's the part that's in there. And the very fact that the response to Gay Pride Month is to put out or display the proclamation on the family in response to the Gay Pride Month, right? I think that shows I'm right. Otherwise, why would this come out as a response to it?
Yeah, no, I saw one post where the person said, I lose clients every time this year. I don't know what industry they were in, but they said, I will not stop displaying this or, discussing my religious views, and I'm going to do it. I lose clients all through June, but I'm true to the faith. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
I think that's all I have. Yeah, that was
That's
a
it?
lot. Yeah, I know. Sorry we went so long. We had so many good stories though.
Hey, what do you get on the radar tomorrow night on Mormonish, Rebecca?
Let's see. Go one more. Do I have a slide? Nope. Let me go ahead. Okay. Yes, we have Ganesh on. Oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. It's called Anti-Brigham Rhetoric, right? How the LDS Church lost its star prophet to conspiracy, because we know Brigham, who was the star prophet, has fallen from grace based on, what the polygamy deniers are saying and other things. So Ganesh wants to discuss this with outside of polygamy, because everybody's saying, oh, Brigham's done this and this and this, all these horrible things. He's going to show that everything Brigham, the song, everything Brigham did, Joseph did better. He's going to show there's a precedence long before Brigham doing the things that he's accused of. And this is outside of polygamy. We're talking about other things. So this will be 6 p.m. tomorrow night on Mormonish.
Very good. I'm just going to keep remembering that Brigham Young had a dream of Joseph Smith driving his first wife away in a carriage.
Yeah. Well, look what happened to Heber C. I mean, I want your wife. Kidding. I want your daughter.
Not kidding.
Not kidding.
You get to keep your wife for now. Okay,
sure.
So
you'll have to go back now. Yeah.
We got on the radar for, that was me. This is what I did over the weekend with Colby Reddish. How did Joseph Smith know? We're responding to chapter 7 in the Light on Truth letter. It's 4 hours and 20 minutes of absolute hilarity. Now, I was talking to Colby earlier today, and I said, I'm surprised that we were able to keep up this discussion. It is actually a lot of information being packed into 4 hours, and it's at a very high level that we're talking. And it's just amazing that, that we have to cover all this, but it's very, very, I think it's beneficial because what we're doing in this process, must have 36 hours together, me and Colby, talking about this Light on Truth letter, is we're creating a resource where people can go and find the answers to the crazy ass stuff that apologists put out there as arguments in favor of Mormonism. We'll tell you the truth about the argument, and we'll tell you the stuff that they're not telling you, and we'll tell you where they're lying to you. And unfortunately, the result is that the evidence for the Book of Mormon really is weak sauce. It's nowhere near as strong as they would like you to believe. And then Wednesday, is that the next one?
Yeah, the topic for Wednesday night, and again, we start at 6 p.m. now instead of 6:20. We're going to go into the Book of Abraham, the missing scroll theory, and just lay that out in a way that I think will make it easy to understand and available to audiences far into the future to very well grasp what's going on here with the missing scroll. And there's, I think, a really cool insight at the end of this conversation that the problem is so much bigger than they say it is. And I'll leave that as a surprise for Wednesday night. And then I'll just note one other thing. Oh, there's that. I don't have the other one in here. Also, I just got finished with a project I had announced a while back where I went into great detail to lay out the entire Book of Abraham translation. It took like an hour and 30 something minutes. And I'm planning to, I still have to make one little edit to it, but I'm planning to have that go out on Thursday. And I'll be in the live chat when that happens, and I'll share it on social media so folks know that that's coming. But it's just part of this series of videos where I'm trying to take issues, explain them as objectively as I can, take out my emotion, and just lay out the issue in its full totality and allow people to have a place to refer people to so that these things, these issues never go away. So anyway, that's it for me.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bill. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Rebecca?
No, I think I've said too much. I just got to go look for that spider. So.
Well, the fun part is when you can't find it anymore.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm feeling like, oh my God.
That's the best part. Eventually, you will have to go to bed and turn off the light.
Maybe. I don't know.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Bill. And please join us next week. By the way, please hit like. Please hit subscribe. Okay? And thank you so much for all of you who've made a donation. Your donations keep us bringing this newscast to you on a regular basis. It's a lot of fun, and I learn a lot. Like on that story I did, the first story I did today, just doing a little digging, finding out what's really going on, and finding out that it's not as it appears. So please join us next week at 6:00 p.m. next Monday for the next episode of the Mormon Newscast. Good night, everybody.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.